Alright legends. Hirosaki YT here, and you already know it's time for another mind-blowing series. Welcome to What If Spider-Man Was Transported to My Hero Academia? Part 1, Chapter 9, Blinded. Somewhere unknown, Goblin paced around the large empty room, fiddling with the gauntlet resting around his hand. He still only owned one of the 6 stones that he required, and 2 were so easily within grasp. All he had to do was one thing: kill Parker and take the stones from his possession. However, his partner has other plans for getting the stones. She always sounded so calm and calculated, almost happy when she spoke. It was as if this woman had no worries weighing her down. She seemed to know exactly where all the pieces needed to be for this to work. He admired how planned out she was, but he did not agree with one rule. He wanted to kill Spider-Man, and she said no. She didn't understand, that's all. She doesn't understand how troublesome the wall-crawler was. He stopped him at every turn, despite being weaker and slower than he was. In this world, Goblin has the element of surprise. He could kill him without much effort, especially with the forces he has collected, but she always says no, and that they need him alive. He disagreed with her opinion, and it was finally time he acted on it. Meanwhile, for class, they were brought to what All Might had called ground beta. It looked identical to that of a small city down to the tiniest detail. The students were brought in wearing their costumes, then split up into 2 group types. One group would be the heroes, the other would act as the villains. The heroes' goal was to rescue the hostages without letting the villains stop you, and the villains must maintain the hostages until the timer goes off. Spider-Man leapt into the air, finding his agility to be supreme in his nanosuit. His feet stuck to a building wall as the student's fist went flying into the ground. The student's skin, while maintaining its overall appearance, looked to harden like stone or iron. His costume consisted of no shirt, only a thick material dressed over his shoulders. He seemed to have been wearing a crimson cloth around his waist that almost dangled like a cape. His pants and shoes were black while they paralleled to his fiery red hair. "You missed, Kirishima!" Spider-Man shouted down to him. "You're lucky your body can harden, or that punch would have hurt." Kirishima shot his fist and chuckled. "I'll get you eventually, Arachnid." "Well, at least you're insulting me correctly." Spider-Man shot a web into the air and swung over Kirishima, landing on the ground just a few yards away. Pushing off his heels, he propelled forward and charged at Kirishima with blinding force. His opponent's skin quickly hardened as he threw the first punch. Making contact felt exactly like punching metal and sent pain through the spider's fist. Still, he continued his assault of kicks and punches against his enemy, forcing him to start moving backwards. Kirishima kept his arms up, guarding his face from most of the blows. Elsewhere in a large computer room, the rest of the students seemed to have been watching them on a massive monitor. No audio was coming through, only the visuals of every major part of the false city. Right now, everyone's focus seemed to be on the fight between Peter and Kirishima. "Peter's gonna wear him down eventually," said Mina. "Kirishima can only hold his skin like that for so long before he gives out." Meanwhile, Momo added, "Peter has superior stamina as well as strength. As far as one-on-one fights go, Peter has the clear advantage." "It's not just about that though," Izuku jumped in. "As long as Peter fights Kirishima, he can't focus on the hostages. While Peter has increased strength and agility, Kirishima can still hold out for a little while. By the time he finally beats him, I don't know if he'll have enough time left to save the hostages." "Indeed!" All Might exclaimed. "Perhaps it's Peter who needs to think his way through the fight." "Yeah, but..." Izuku looked concerned suddenly. "He seems distracted. Since I live with him, I kind of know how he is when he's focused." "And he doesn't look focused." "What do you mean?" Mina asked. "I mean, Peter always focuses on saving the people in danger. He can easily get away from Kirishima and rescue them, but he's focusing on trying to beat him in a fight. I'm just wondering why he's wasting so much time. It's like he's not thinking straight right now." "Did anything happen recently?" Momo asked him. "To distract him, I mean." "Well, actually, something weird happened this morning. We were on our way to school when Peter spotted one of the students from Class 1B. I don't remember what her name was, but he rushed over to talk to her. And even then, he had been acting strange all morning. I'm wondering if she's connected somehow." "Which student was it?" "She had orange hair, tied into a ponytail. And blue eyes too." Momo nodded, crossing her arms and looking down at the surface of the floor. Peter was normally one to be focused when it came to classes, just like she was. He was intelligent and tactical, and he always had a smart way out of things. Despite his powers, he always put his brains first. She admired that about him. So, if something has suddenly changed, it's a raise for concern. What could the girl from Class 1B have to do with his sudden change in attitude? Peter flipped over Kirishima and webbed him in the back, sticking his arms together. He couldn't escape it no matter how hard he struggled. Just as he turned around to face him, Kirishima was met with a powerful fist to the face that sent him directly onto the concrete. That wasn't so hard, chuckled Spiderman. From the speakers high above in the buildings rang a massive alert sound, almost like a fire alarm that caused him to recoil. The voice of All Might rang high above, "Time is up. The winner is Kirishima. Hero loses." "What?" shouted Spiderman. "I thought I had more time." Pete," Kirishima called out, "can you get these things off me?" Momo watched the screen intently as Spiderman was in distress over his loss. The fact that he lost wasn't what bothered her, rather it was why he lost. He could have webbed up Kirishima and rescued the hostages in the first 5 minutes. He had 15 minutes to complete the task. Why was he so distracted? Was he angry? Did he focus on fighting because he needed to vent out his frustrations? What was going through his mind? Whatever it was, the girl from Class 1B had something to do with it. It was the end of the day now and everyone had begun to go home. While most people found their friends and started for the gate, Momo had a different goal in mind. She wandered around the front of the school and looked at the appearances of many of the students as they left. It wasn't until she reached the fountain that she spotted someone matching what Izuku described. She was looking at her phone, oblivious to the world around her. Momo didn't know why she was going out of her way for this, but that didn't matter as she approached the table. "Excuse me?" she asked as she came up. "Are you from Class 1B? Kendo put down her phone and turned her head to the stranger, tilting her head. "Yeah, why do you ask? Do you know someone named Peter Parker by any chance?" Kendo's eyebrows went up as the familiar name rang through her ears. Her mind went straight into the memories of last night, being the most recent and strongest thoughts that she had concerning him. Kendo attempted to keep a level face, not showing any sign of panic or worry. "We've talked once or twice." "Why?" "I want to talk to you about him. In private." She sounded serious, and Kendo wasn't in the mood to start any kind of scene. Stuffing her phone into her pocket, she followed Momo back into the empty school. They closed the doors tight and gave the silence a moment to settle in. Finally, Momo was the first to speak. "Peter Parker is a brilliant student," she started. "He's focused on his work, yet learns to have fun with it. In most of the heroics classes we've had over the past week, Peter Parker has excelled in his performance even if he fails to complete his goal." Kendo looked at her with a puzzled look. "I haven't seen it for myself, but I'm sure he's a great student." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because today it was different. He was unfocused and reckless. Today's goal was a rescue, and his focus was more on fighting his enemy. Normally saving people comes first, but not today. Today he was angry because something was on his mind, and that brings me to why we're here. I know you talked to him this morning, and this change in him only took place today. I want to know what you were talking about." Kendo's eyes widened as she tried to think of what to say. She couldn't tell her what they talked about because she swore to keep it a secret. Peter was a good guy, and it would be wrong to turn him in like that despite what he may have done. But this confrontation does put light on how Peter is really taking this. He seemed okay with ending his crusade when she confronted him. Could he have been lying about how he was taking it? He seemed happy, or at least at peace. We were just talking," Kendo started. "He asked me how my morning was." "That's it. After that we just walked to school together. Whatever is going on with him, it has nothing to do with me." There was a faint ripple in Kendo's voice, as if she was startled. It was quiet, but not enough to evade Momo's radar. "When it comes to the stability of my classmates, it's my duty to take action as the vice representative," Momo stated, stepping toward her. "Please. I'm not trying to criminalize you. I'm trying to help my classmate and friend. If there's anything you're not telling me, don't hold back." Kendo was running out of words to combat her with. It was clear now that Peter wasn't honest about how he felt, and this was her fault. If she told Momo the truth, it would only make things worse. No, she needed to take care of this herself. "I'm really not sure," Kendo said. but I'll talk to him about it and see what I can find out. Okay? Momo squinted her eyes at her, then sighed, fine. Thank you for your time, and I apologize for causing a disruption to your day. Momo left without another word, and Kendo stood there with a hand on her chest. Her heart was beating fast from the fear. The weight she thought was lifted from her consciousness was now right back where it was. The only way to remove it was to fix things with Peter. The problem was that her view on the situation hasn't changed, no matter how much she wishes the law was different. Still, the best thing to do is to talk to him and figure out a solution. She figured that he couldn't have gotten far after school had ended. All she did was trace back where they had walked when they met this early morning. Thankfully, she had found him walking on the sidewalk with Izuku Midoriya. She assumed there was a reason they were always together, she just never bothered to ask about it. As she was about to approach them, Kendo suddenly stopped. If Peter really was upset about this, wouldn't that make her the last person he'd want to see? What if whatever she says turns up useless in his eyes? No, that doesn't seem like the kind of person he is. Taking a deep breath, she approached them and tapped Peter's shoulder. Peter turned around and stopped, his eyes widening in surprise. Kendo, hi. What are you? I want to talk to you, she cut in, to sort things out. Giving her a strange look, he nodded and gestured to Izuku to go on without him. Kendo and Peter began to walk in the opposite direction as she stayed close to him. I wanted to apologize, she started. I didn't see how upset that you were. One of your classmates told me how distracted you were today, and I can't help but feel that. It's my fault. Kendo you were following your heart, and I didn't really think about that. I know what you were doing was noble, and I shoved it back in your face. So, I'm sorry. Peter took a moment to absorb her words as he stared at his feet. The walls that protected him emotionally had broken down and he finally looked genuinely upset. Of course, he appreciated her apology and commitment to her morals. The situation, however, was still difficult and fragile. I know you still want to do something to help, and I get it, Kendo continued. We can't fight the villains whether we like it or not. But, well, you don't have to. What do you mean? You can go to the police station and tell them all about the villains you saw. They'll be on the lookout for them, and pro-heroes can stop them. You know what they look like, right? Not just the water villain? You did say there were others. Yeah, I did, and they want those stones too. The police and the pros can stop them. Peter stopped walking, causing Kendo to come to a halt as well. Kendo, he said, those stones, no one can have them, not even me. I plan to return them to the vault they came from. You don't have to though. The police and the pros can handle it as long as you tell them everything. It's the best and most legal way to do the right thing. Silence fell between them. These stones were a subject she realized he wouldn't budge on. At least tell the police about the villains. Then, finding the stones will be easier for you. He looked up at her, almost a grin on his face. Am I hearing a change of mind in you? A small one. Finding stones isn't dangerous or illegal. What's dangerous is the people after them, right? He smiled brightly. Right. She made a valid point, despite him not agreeing with some of her statements. If pro-heroes and the police knew these villains were in town, it would make it harder for them to hide. They'd be on the police scanners and hunted by more than just him. If they were on the radar, it would make it easier for Spider-Man to maneuver around them and find them if one locates the stones. It may not be exactly what Kendo wants of him, but it's an advantage. Okay, Peter sighed. Why don't we head over now and tell them what we saw? Deal? She smiled brightly with a sigh of relief. Yeah, okay. She walked up and hugged him. I'm sorry I upset you before. He hugged her back, stroking her head to calm her down. It's okay, Kendo. Thank you for coming back and talking to me. Her cheeks turned red as her face buried into his chest. She was able to hear his heartbeat being so close to him. It was fast but slowing down as he calmed himself from the conversation. Meanwhile, hers just sped up unknowingly. It took them about 20 minutes to reach the police station, which reminded him of the one back home. When they had gone inside, they asked if they could report a few sightings. After some waiting, the police had separated Kendo and Peter, and brought them into separate rooms. Peter ended up waiting in the office of the chief, fighting with his wrists. Underneath his school uniform sleeves were his web shooters. His traditional gear was somewhat clunky and budget a bit under his sleeves. Still, he was lucky to have them on him considering what he was planning. Finally, one of the detectives walked in. He appeared as your traditional detective with classic black hair. He sat down at his desk and addressed Peter with a smile. Behind him was a man with a pencil and sketchpad, ready to draw whatever was described. "I'd like to thank you for coming in," said the man. "My name is Naomasa Tsukachi. It's very responsible of you to report any villain sightings you may see. We here at the station work hard to share what we find with the pro heroes and resolve the issues at hand. Now, let's get started. Do you know how many villains you saw?" Peter took a moment to think. I think at least 2. "Can you describe them?" "Yes. One I saw in the distance. He calls himself the Vulture. He usually wears a big green suit with giant wings on his arms. He's old and bald, kind of wrinkly around the eyes." He continued to describe his appearance, until the sketch artist showed him what he had. Peter examined, "A few more moles on his head and I think you're good." "You said you saw 2, Naomasa asked. "Who was the other one?" Peter hesitated, and looked down at his feet. He calls himself Hydro-Man. Appearance-wise he's pretty basic, so he'll be harder to spot. But he has power over water, as in he could turn any part of his body into water and manipulate it. He went on to describe him, slightly more hesitant this time around considering their meeting the night before. Once he had finished, he waited for the sketch artist to finish. While he continued to draw, Naomasa continued to speak. "Where and when did you see these villains?" Peter couldn't exactly tell him the truth, at least not about Hydro-Man. If Kendo was being serious, just throwing a punch at Hydro-Man would land him behind bars. "I was out with my friend Atsuka Kendo. We saw him fly over us on a pillar of water, and he was causing a lot of disruption, and tried to attack Kendo. When we escaped, we came here." Naomasa wrote down Peter's words on paper, making note of his story. He likely wanted to compare his story with Kendo, explaining why they had been separated for this. If their stories didn't match, it would mean some issues for the two of them. Should something happen, Peter needs to make sure that Kendo doesn't take any of the blame. It wouldn't be fair to her if she suffered for his actions. "That would make 3 new villains in the last week," said Naomasa. "That Rhino character showed up a little over a week ago, and we have no idea where he came from." "Where is the Rhino anyway?" "Right now, in containment with level 5 security. He's a feisty one." Peter's heart skipped a beat as his spider sense had gone off in his head. His vision had become more intense, the details of the office becoming more focused and specific. It was as if he could feel every molecule of the environment, and something was about to shift. Quickly his eyes moved around the room and searched for the anomaly, until his eyes landed on the window behind Naomasa. The light coming through had begun to shrink, and his shadow grew closer. Without thinking about the consequences, Peter leapt forward and grabbed Naomasa by the shoulders and tackled him to the ground. The window of the room shattered, and pieces of the wall went flying. The sketch artist had been knocked out by the debris, dropping the notepad to the ground. A figure jumped in wearing strange gauntlets on his arms. His outfit consisted of clothing in a yellow and brown color palette, with a full-headed mask of the same color. He walked in and stepped on the artist's sketchpad, turning around to face Peter. "Gabi said you'd be here," the man said, pointing his gauntlets at him. "I've been waiting to kill you." The door to the room was kicked down and officers came rushing in pointing their guns. They shouted at him to freeze and stand down, but he simply turned around and fired off his gauntlets. They released a massive high-frequency air blast that destroyed the wall and sent them all flying to the ground. The other officers started to run around, looking for weapons and calling for backup. Peter grabbed Naomasa by the shoulders and helped him up, looking out at the street outside. Peter grabbed Naomasa with one hand and the artist with the other, dragging them both out and setting them down. Naomasa was still conscious as he reached for his cell phone, flipping it open and begging to press buttons. The man stepped back out and pointed his gauntlets at them. "You pigs can call me the Shocker. Not that it matters since none of you are living to see another day." Naomasa got to his knees and pointed his gun, trying to stay in front of Peter. "Don't move, or I'll shoot." "Oh? You'll shoot? So will I." He fired off his gauntlets again and knocked the gun out of his hands. "You won't get away with this," Naomasa said as he laid on the ground. "And why is that?" Shocker asked. A figure suddenly landed on the ground near them, sending a massive blast of air and smoke through the area. The figure stood tall and proud, wearing a classic superhero outfit. His smile was bright and joyful, like he enjoyed the fight ahead of him. "Because I am here. shouted All Might as the dust cleared enough to see him. "Who the heck is this clown?" mocked Shocker as All Might laughed at him. "It appears you don't know what you're in for," he exclaimed. "Allow me to introduce myself." All Might suddenly struck a classic superhero pose, spreading his stance and throwing one fist into the air. "I am the symbol of peace. The #1 pro hero. All Might. And you, evildoer, are in a heap of trouble." Shocker scoffed. "Yeah, right." He fired off his gauntlets at him and expected it to knock him away. Instead, All Might threw his fist forward just as the blast reached him. Suddenly the energy was pushed and went flying back to its source. It struck Shocker and sent him to the ground in surprise. The unknown hero had bounced his own attack back with nothing more than a punch. He had never met anyone like that before. "Young Parker. I hope I have not arrived too late. I do wonder what you may be doing at the station, my boy," All Might said, "but we shall worry about that later." Shocker jumped back to his feet and stumbled a few feet away. It was clear that he was highly outmatched by this so-called pro. If he stayed too much longer, it was likely he would get arrested. "I don't plan to go behind bars, you costumed freak." All Might suddenly leapt forward and threw his fist at the ground in front of Shocker. The intensity of the impact pushed on Shocker and sent him into the air. He landed on his stomach and bounced off the concrete. "Young Parker," All Might shouted, "I suggest retreating from this area. I shall find you again once I finish with this villain." His first instinct was to do as he was told and escape to the street next to them. But as he started making his way there, he stopped and looked back at the massive hole in the wall. He wasn't sure, but Kendo could still be somewhere inside. Even though the threat was here rather than there, it was best to be sure of her safety. He turned himself around and charged back into the building. "That is the wrong way," All Might shouted, then turned his attention back to Shocker. "Who are you? What is it you want here? Why would I tell a hero like you anything?" Shocker shouted back, "I'm doing my job, that's all." Neo Mesa coughed as he stood up. "I heard him talk about wanting to kill someone. He was told they would be here, and he attacked where I was questioning Mr. Parker. So, either he wanted me dead." All Might nodded in understanding, curiosity running through him. If he was here to kill Peter, there was a chance this is a villain he's fought against before. First the Rhino, and now this man. Just how many of Peter's enemies followed him here, and for what reason? "I'm afraid you won't be killing anyone today," All Might declared, "because I am here to stop you." Just as he had finished his sentence, a massive gust of purple smoke opened behind Shocker. A large green hand grabbed him by the shoulder and pulled him in, vanishing in the dust. "No!" All Might leapt forward as quickly as he could, but the portal had closed just as he reached it. All that remained was a small gust of wind spiraling where the smoke once was. Peter rushed into the broken police station, jumping over the debris that laid on the ground. It had been evacuated after the attack, leaving no souls but his own to remain. It was likely that Kendo had been evacuated with the rest of them. Still, he couldn't shake this feeling he was getting that something was wrong. Purple smoke began to rise in front of him. Looking down, he saw a ball of the substance building below his feet. Before he was able to move, he found himself falling into the portal and vanishing from sight. Peter reappeared on the roof of the building, barely managing to land on his feet before he was pinned down by a pillar of water. His clothes became drenched as he struggled to keep breathing. Through the layer of water on his vision, he saw several figures that he could just barely recognize. The most important was the large green figure in front, staring him down. "Hello, Peter," Goblin said as he leaned down. "It's nice to see you again." Peter tried to push himself up, but the water continued to weigh him down. "I haven't seen you since the SHIELD prison. I hear you enrolled into that school for superheroes. You must feel right at home there." Nice and safe, protected by super-powered freaks, his voice had a hint of poison. "I have been itching to kill you, and finally I've had enough waiting. Once you're out of the way, the Infinity Stones will be all mine." Peter tried to talk, but he was met with a gargle instead. "Sorry, no jokes or one-liners today. Just the sweet embrace of cold death." He turned to Hydro Man, who had been standing right over him. "Drown him, no mercy." Using his other arm, Hydro Man lifted Peter up and engulfed him in a floating orb of water. Peter's vision began to blur as he struggled to hold his breath. He fidgeted with his web shooters as he tried to undo the cartridge. Suddenly a fist flew into the water and struck his stomach, causing him to release his breath. "You won't be pulling that trick again," said Goblin as he removed his fist. Now out of breath, water had begun to invade his lungs. As his vision turned to black, he used his last remaining will to release one of his web pellets and crush it in his hand. The webs scattered and consumed the water in seconds. The webs escaped the orb and touched the ground below, making a pillar inside of the sphere. Peter grabbed the bottom of the web pillar and pulled himself down, rolling straight out of the water and jumping away with a massive gasp. "You fool!" yelled Goblin, "kill him!" Peter landed on the ledge of the building and held his chest, coughing up water. He didn't have time to rest as his spider sense sounded in his ears. A blast of air fired at him as he jumped backpacks and dodged it. Peter was met with a fist just as he hit the ground, and he back-rolled to recover to his feet. In front of him stood Hydro-Man, Shocker, and Goblin. They inched toward him as he grew closer to the roof's edge. He lost all his web pellets during his escape, so swinging away was no longer an option. "Get back!" a voice yelled. A blinding light erupted from the sky just behind Peter. Everyone on the roof shut their eyes and were unable to see clearly. Through the gaps between his fingers, all Peter could see was a silhouette land in front of him, likely the source of the light. "What are you doing?" the voice yelled, sounding feminine. "I told you not to kill him and you go behind my back?" Goblin was about to retort, but she seemed to lift her hand and blast him with an unknown energy. He backed down immediately. "You forget that this is a partnership that I formed. I can easily dissolve it. Use the stone and take us away from here." "Now, Parker needs to die," retorted Goblin. "No. He doesn't," she yelled back, raising her hand again. "All right." Goblin gave in, lifting his hand and opening a portal. The three villains quickly retreated into it, leaving only the figure of light. She turned around and faced Peter, her appearance still shrouded by light. "Get some rest," she said. "I'll make sure they don't bother you again." As she entered the breach, the light immediately vanished from the area and the portal disappeared. Peter fell to his knees and gasped for air, unable to currently process what had happened. He wiped the water from his face and let himself completely collapse. As if he didn't have enough to worry about, now he had this mystery woman. It was clear she was working with Goblin, so why did she save him? Chapter 10, Just a Kid. Peter sat on the edge of the paramedic truck, a towel wrapped around his shoulders. His lips were only a little purple from the run-in with Hydro-Man, and there were bags under his eyes. The experience today wore him out greatly, so he had been asked to remain at the scene for a little while longer. Kendo of course stayed with him, sitting next to him on the truck as reporters came in with cameras. When they had asked to interview Peter, he politely declined, and they moved on. The day hadn't gone how he expected, but at least he knew for sure that Goblin was out there. Meanwhile, his thoughts went to the strange woman from before. She had swooped in and saved him from Goblin and his goons. The strange part was how she spoke to them. It was clear that they were working together from what she had said, and yet she chose to save him. Why did she not just let Peter die? What does she gain from him living another day? "Peter," said Kendo to get his attention, "I'm sorry this happened. I shouldn't have brought you to the police station." "It's okay," he replied. "It's likely they would have attacked me no matter where I went. Why do they want you dead so badly?" "I don't understand it. It's complicated, Kendo. Honestly, I don't know what their plan is, just that I'm enemies with them all back home." Kendo paused, laying her head on his shoulder. "That detective will probably ask you questions, you know." "I know, and I don't know what to tell him." "Maybe tell him your history with them, or about the stones." Peter turned his head to her. "I can't tell anyone else about the stones, Kendo. Just trust me on that." Just beyond the police tape, a car pulled up and parked next to the sidewalk. Jumping out of it was Izuku and his mother, both with faces of worry. Izuku jumped over the tape and rushed over to him despite the police calling out for him to stop. Eventually though, they simply let him go and allowed his mother through as well. "Oh, thank goodness," cried Mrs. Midoriya. "Izuku said you'd be a bit later getting home, but then we saw the news about the police station." "What on earth were you doing here?" Peter looked at them with a sad expression. Her reaction reminded him so much of his aunt, who worried every time he came home late or with a bruise. In fact, the resemblance almost broke his heart. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Midoriya," Peter said sadly. "Kendo and I had seen some villains, and we came to report the sighting to the police. That's when they attacked the station." I was just trying to do the right thing. He knew fighting villains without a license was illegal, but he still fully intended to fight them anyway. That didn't mean that he didn't feel bad about who he hurt in the process. Worrying his current foster family is the last thing he wants to do. Mrs. Midoriya sighed. I understand, Peter. It's not your fault. I just worry about you and Izuku. You're put through so many dangerous situations at that school. As a mother, it scares me. I just want to make sure you two are safe. Peter smiled warmly. We're okay, Mrs. Midoriya. I promise. It's my fault, ma'am, Kendo said. I brought him here after we saw those villains. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. Oh, I don't blame you, sweetie, she replied. No one could have seen this coming, spider sense or not. Peter chuckled. I see what you did there. Why don't we go home? She suggested. I can make dinner and you can rest up. Can I just talk to Peter first? Kendo asked, tugging on Peter's shoulder. Of course, she said. Izuku and I will be waiting in the car. As Izuku and his mother made their way back to the car, Peter looked at Kendo with a puzzled look. These villains, Kendo asked, they're going to keep hunting you, aren't they? Yes, he said, it's likely, anyway. Though, there was a woman who stopped them from killing me. I don't think she wants them hunting me, even though they seem to be working together. Don't you think you should tell the police about your connection to them? I can't stand keeping all these secrets. I know. Peter sighed. It's becoming more dangerous. A rock suddenly flew and aimed itself at Peter. He reacted quickly and caught it in the palm of his hand, clenching it tightly and looking in the direction it came from. In a nearby alley, he saw a familiar figure standing there, looking tired and sluggish in his true form. Kendo, Peter continued, please excuse me for a moment. He didn't give her time to respond as he made his way into the alley. All Might was standing there, waiting for him in his true form. His superhero costume was too big for his actual size and dragged down on his thin body. There were bags under his eyes, likely meaning he pushed himself today. Maintaining his massive form must be difficult on his stamina. Peter, All Might spoke up. We need to talk about the villains that attacked the station today. Detective Naomasa and I agree when we think that they came to the station hunting you. The rhino from 1 week ago, he knew you. He talked about Spiderman during interrogation. Then there was the shocker, who attacked the room that you were in. Your villains keep popping up one by one, and it's looking suspicious. I need you to talk to me, Peter. Detective Naomasa and I are close. He's one of the few who knows my secret. We can help you, but you need to trust us. Peter leaned against the wall of the alley and stuffed his hands in his pockets. He was backed into a corner now. There wasn't a likely chance he could bluff his way through everything. All Might was a good man, and he needed to trust him with at least some of it. Besides, he didn't want these villains coming after Izuku and his mother. There are more than just Rhino and Shocker, Peter began. From what I know, there is also a man named Hydro Man, another called Vulture, and one named the Green Goblin. Do you know why they followed you? Why are they hunting you? There was no way Peter could tell them about the stones. If he did, they would look for them. Those stones can't fall into unknowing hands under any circumstances. I don't. Not the others anyway, but Goblin hates me most of all. We have a lot of history. What kind of history? His real name is Norman Osborn. He runs a company called Oscorp, and he's the father of my best friend back home. We created each other. All Might was curious now. How so? Peter looked down again to avoid his gaze. I just feel responsible for what he's become. And I'm always the one to stop him. It's like an endless loop. I see. He stepped forward. I'll have to inform the police department about this. If they really are after you, then you'll need protection from them. We can assign a pro hero as a temporary bodyguard until these villains can be detained. Peter looked back up at him. Fitting, you really don't have to. He stopped mid-sentence. He couldn't protect Izuku and his mother all on his own. Even then, it's illegal to fight them at all. The situation has pros and cons. He can't look for the stones with a pro always on his tail. In fact, it would be near impossible to go anywhere if he always has company. That aside, it's the best scenario to protect the people he cares about. Figuring out how to continue his search is a bridge he needs to cross later. I understand, Peter surrendered. I appreciate your help, All Might. And I appreciate your cooperation, he replied. It's the best move to protect everyone. I'll inform the chief, and we'll set everything up. We'll search for a pro who will be willing to watch over you for a little while. Is there anything else that you're not telling me? Anything at all? Peter looked away. No, sir. All Might took a moment to stare at him, before letting out a sigh. All right. Get yourself home and rest. I'll see you at class tomorrow. Peter nodded and left the alleyway quickly. All Might stood there with a look of suspicion. He had a feeling that Peter was hiding information from him. In fact, he's always been a mystery ever since he arrived. Pleasant as he was a boy of secrets. He was so used to keeping things from people, the truth must be a difficult thing to tell. For now, the information he had was enough. These villains were dangerous, and they weren't going to stop. Meanwhile, you're going to stop. In the large empty room, the four villains were scattered about. Goblin leaned against the wall and scoffed at the smaller woman who yelled at him. What you did today was unforgivable. She shouted. This had been the first time she had been legitimately angry since they had met. I told you we need him to find the other stones. Why? Goblin shouted back. We can find them just fine on our own. We don't need Parker. Yes. We do. Because you don't have the patience to find them on your own. These stones are scattered across the city, hiding from us. As villains, we can't just waltz around the city however we please. Peter has already found 2 of them, while you only have 1. He could easily use the stones to win, but what does he do? He doesn't use them, because he's weak, because he's strong. She emphasized, he understands that power like that can't be abused. You, however, will abuse the stones the second you have them. That is why you can't be trusted to find them. It must be him. You will listen, or help me. I will blind you so badly, it removes your vision altogether. Understand? Goblin said nothing. I said. She began to glow a terrifying level of light, engulfing the entire room and removing all its shadows. Understand? Goblin tried to shut his eyes, but it simply shined through his eyelids. He fell to his knees as the light seemed to produce heat as well, pushing against his body. All right. Just turn it off. The light dwindled and died, bringing the shadows back into the room. Thank you, Osborne. I hope you'll behave here on out. Follow my plan, and we both benefit. I promise you. She grabbed a nearby chair and sat down. Right now we're at an impasse. We need him to find the other stones, but now he's being protected by the police. He won't be able to do anything for us. So, what do we do, then? Asked Hydro-Man. You just said we can't kill him. Correct, but we can motivate him. She leaned against the edge of the chair. Whether fighting crime is illegal or not, he'll do whatever he has to if he knows it's right. He's a true hero down to his core, so he can't help it. We just need to motivate him somehow. She perks up. Bait. We bait him. Give him something else to fight for. Finding the stones, that's just him being responsible. But if we want him to fight harder, we need him to have something to fight for. It has to be something personal or... She pauses. Someone personal. Goblin sat against the wall with a huff. He hated working with this woman, but he knew that it was necessary. He wanted so badly to put her in her place and take over everything, but that's not the smartest move. She has power, resources, and an understanding of this world. Whether he liked it or not, he needed her. The issue was that her plan moved too slow. Every second he wasted was another stone he may lose. Peter could use the stones any time he wanted, but he chooses not to. Peter in the picture causes problems. It's obvious that he hates him, but he needs him dead because it makes this so much easier. He'll follow her for now, but he'll make his own moves the first chance he gets. The next day, the weekend finally rolled around for the students. Peter hadn't even bothered to get up from his bed. The cover remained on him throughout the morning as he laid on his side. He stared at his backpack, which contained 2 stones inside a bag. He had so much power just within arm reach. However, he knew it would be irresponsible for him to use that power for himself. It's not something he should do, especially with the goblin after them. Was that woman after the stones too? It would explain why they are working together. Goblin wasn't often one to take orders from anyone or let himself be pushed around. He was stronger than that, smarter. So, perhaps he's just using her until she no longer has what he needs. He spent the whole morning with these thoughts in his head, tossing and turning with sorrow. He was in a very tight situation. All Might knows these villains are after him, and now so do the police. There's no way he'll have a moment of peace long enough to find the stones, not unless he runs away. Things need time to cool down, so it's likely the villains may go into hiding anyway. Perhaps taking it easy was the best thing for a while. Izuku entered his room and greeted Peter with a look of delight, but also concern. "Hey," he said, still hanging onto the door, "the pro hero that the police assigned to us is here." Peter sighed and sat up, pushing himself to his feet. "Who did they get?" "Someone I haven't heard of, but she's supposed to be good." "Wanna come say hi?" "Sure." Izuku saw his obvious distress. "Peter, it's not your fault. The police and the pros are going to stop those bad guys. We're going to be okay. I know you think you're causing us too much trouble, but it's alright." Peter put his hands in his pockets, faintly looking up. "Okay. Let's go meet her." Izuku and Peter stepped out of the room and into the kitchen. Immediately he saw a young woman talking with Mrs. Midoriya. She was only a little taller than Peter, likely meaning she wasn't that much older either. She wore a thin dark tan collar jacket, open to show her purple shirt. Her pants matched her jacket color, without much more detail to it. Around her neck was a light orange scarf, not too long. Her skin was dark, parallel to her bright blonde hair. Her arms had sleeves that didn't connect to the shirt, with a blue bead bracelet around her wrists. Her fingers weren't covered by the sleeve, and they only traveled up to her elbow. She eyed Peter as he came in and smiled, standing up straight. "Hi there." She greeted. "Hi," he greeted back. "Are you the pro hero?" "I am." She held her hands together. "You can call me Overcast." "It's nice to meet you." Peter pulled up a chair and sat down, taking in the details of their protector. "I'm sorry you have to be here for us." "Don't be. Stuff like this happens. Sometimes a pro is put on protection duty, it's nothing new. Plus, I have several other pros on speed dial. You couldn't be in safer hands." Izuku stepped in. "I just have some questions. You said your name was Overcast. What can you do?" She grinned at him. "They chose me to protect you because I'm good at making things disappear. Watch this." She held up her hands, and out of them appeared a mist of darkness. The room was completely engulfed by the shadows, and the lights were unable to stop it. "I control shadows," she said, her voice seeming to come from nowhere. "I can provide easy escape from villains should they come for you. When inside my shadows, you can't see or feel anything around you, making it easy to pass by someone. I can use it offensively as well, but it's limited." The shadows vanished and returned to her hands, the lights returning to bloom. "I can assure you, you're safe with me. How old are you?" Peter asked. "I graduated from U.A 7 years ago actually. I'm 25 years old. I know I'm young, but I promise that I can protect you. I graduated top of my class after all." "She seems nice, boys," Mrs. Midoriya said. "I have faith in her." "Right," Peter said, standing up. "I'm gonna step outside." Peter walked across the room and opened the window, stepping out and crawling onto the outside wall. "Is he okay?" Overcast asked. "I don't know," Izuku sighed, sitting where Peter left the chair. "These villains came here because of him. I think he just feels guilty about it all. He's not gonna feel any better being cooped up in here all day. I just wish we could help him." Overcast put a hand to her chin, squinting her eyes as she tried to think of a solution. "He takes this stuff pretty seriously. I wonder how much time he actually spends just being a kid. Wait." She slammed her fist into her other palm. "I got an idea." "How close are you to your classmates?" "Well, pretty close. We have a group chat for our phones and everything." "Why?" Peter held himself on the wall primarily using his hands. The sun was high in the sky now, so it must have been the afternoon. All he could really do was stick there and take deep breaths for the past hour. He hasn't been handling things very well the last few days. Everything fell apart after Itsuka found out what he was doing. He can't blame her, however. She only wanted what she thought was best. She wanted to protect him from harm, but the situation was still a bother. He had too much stress on his shoulders right now. "Hey, Peter." Peter looked down and saw a small crowd of people below him. After squinting his eyes, he recognized them as his classmates from the UA. The one who called out was Momo, waving to him with a bright smile. He nearly didn't recognize anyone outside their school uniforms. He was surprised to see them all there, Bakugo included, though he didn't seem very happy about it. "Hey Peter." Mina called out next, "Come on down." Peter leapt down with little effort and landed in front of his friends with a confused look. "What are you all doing here?" "Like, literally all of you," he eyed Bakugo. "Screw you." Bakugo shouted from the back, "I only came for the free food I was promised." "What he means," Momo said, "is that Izuku called us and asked if we all wanted to pitch in and go to the arcade in town. We know things have been a bit stressful for you, so we thought this would be something fun to do. We're gonna go one way or another I guess, but we'd love it if you could come along." Peter looked to Izuku who had been standing in the front. "You brought them here?" "Yeah," he smiled. "You wanna come?" Peter looked at each of the 20 classmates standing there. It almost made him tear up that they came here, whether it was for him or not. He had been through so much the last week, maybe this is what he needs. A day off from all the doom and gloom could really help him think. "Okay," Peter said with a smile. "Okay, sure. Let's go, yay." Mina shouted, jumping into Peter's arms and hugging him tightly. "This is going to be so much fun." Peter turned red from her contact, but hugged back nonetheless. The arcade was massive and full of games on several different floors. It had many winter colors with neon lights hanging above. Children and teenagers were all over, playing games and eating in the food court. Bakugo immediately walks in that direction with the money given to him by the group. Everyone else began to spread out into several groups. Peter had stuck with Todoroki, Mina, and Momo. Mina had immediately pulled them to the virtual racing games, where they were able to race locally together. Her positive attitude was a nice change for Peter, as he needed a happier day. Todoroki was much more chill with it all, though that's not to say he wasn't enjoying himself. "Oh, this one is next," Mina said, pulling on Peter's arm as she pointed at a shooting game. "You're really excited, aren't you?" Peter asked. "I mean, yeah. This is a great place. I just want to have fun." "I like that about you." Mina looked at him with a red face. "Like what about me?" "You always have fun with things. Even when things look rough, you find a reason to smile. I really admire that about you. Plus, you're pretty strong too." Mina smiled brightly, tugging him over to the games. "Hey! Wait for me!" Momo shouted as she tried to keep up. "I can play shooters too." Overcast stayed behind and watched everyone as they scattered about the arcade. She did her best to stay close to Peter without imposing on his good time. She even played a few games of her own as she kept an eye on them. It was amusing to see Mina and Momo unknowingly fighting for his attention. Whether that be out of love or just classic friendship was up to them. Mina herself was often cheery from what she knew, so this isn't out of character. It's Momo that's interesting to watch. She got into UA based on recommendation, so she was a very focused student. She seemed to care for Peter, perhaps out of respect for someone who tries just as hard at school as she does. Whether or not there was more to it had yet to be discovered. Children will be children, no one can change that. Seeing them interact with each other suddenly made her sad. Their joy reminded her of some of the times she's had with friends. Times like those shouldn't make her sad, but they do. "Ms. Overcast?" Yururika poked her shoulder, snapping her out of her funk. "Oh. Sorry, hello Yururika. Do you need something? You just seemed upset for some reason. Is everything okay?" Overcast sighed, looking back at Peter and his group. "They're just reminding me of some people I used to know. People that aren't around anymore. Oh, I'm sorry." "Oh, no. It's all right." Overcast laughed nervously. "Really, don't worry about it. Thank you for checking on me though, you have a good heart." She ran her hand on the top of Yururaka's hair, messing it up. "Now go have fun." "Laser tag!" Mina shouted, gaining the attention of everyone around her. "There is a laser tag arena. Guys? Let's play. 10 versus 10. Doesn't that require Bakugo?" Peter asked. "Oh, I'm sure we can get him to join if we bargain food into it." Bakugo suddenly rushes over with his shoulders pushed up, a look of ferocity on his face. "Finally a game more my style. Bring it on, you weaklings." It didn't take long for everyone to put on their gear and step into the arena. The teams were split into 10 each and put on opposite sides of the arena. One side was red, the other was green. The arena was dark, minus neon lights on the ceiling and on their gear. Other than a few obstacles, the arena was completely open. Peter was on the green team with teammates like Izuku, Momo, and Yururika. The other team consisted of combatants like Bakugo, Tenya, and Todoroki. Mina jumped up and down, wearing the green team's color. "Let's get started," she shouted, just as the timer sounded off. Bakugo was the first to rush forward and fire off a few shots. A few of Peter's teammates got hit and were knocked out of the game for a few seconds, before coming back online. Peter, however, dodged easily and the dive slid under Bakugo, shooting him right in the chest. "Damn you!" Bakugo shouted as he composed himself, "You won't be getting another shot like that." Mina quickly shot Bakugo in the back, laughing and running off. Bakugo screamed and ran off in a random direction. Izuku clearly did his best to avoid confrontation with him, keeping his gun close to his chest. Above them was a massive TV that kept score for all the combatants. In first place was Momo, who continued to shoot her classmates with precision and timing. Peter wasn't far behind her, still needing to surpass Todoroki in overall score despite being on the same team. Peter quickly hid behind an obstacle, where Momo had also been hiding. "Hello neighbor," she grinned, "fancy meeting you here." Peter was panting with a smile on his face. "So, what you been up to? Shooting peeps, counting virtual kills?" She laughed, "Something like that." "I'm glad you came along. You seemed like you needed it." "Yeah, I really did. Thanks for bringing me. It means a lot to me, Momo." She turned red, looking away and brushing her hair. "Well, anything for you, Peter. You're a good guy. You don't often meet a lot of good guys. I mean, you saved everyone on your first day. I'd say you're already a pro hero." "I appreciate it," Peter said, "but I wouldn't call myself a good guy. I'm just doing right with what I have and making up for the mistakes I've made." "Such as?" Peter was silent, looking down at his gun to observe its details. Momo's face dropped as she realized she may have hit a nerve, just like before in the classroom. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." Momo looked down. "I get there's something about your past you don't want to share. I'm sorry I keep bringing it up." No. It's okay." Peter reassured, It's a very personal thing, but something bad happened, and I try to be better because of it." "You know what I mean?" Momo nods, though still looking down at the floor. Peter put a hand to her chin and lifted it up, smiling. "Hey," he smiled, "I'm fine. Don't worry." She smiled brightly, holding her gun close. "Okay." Izuku suddenly screamed, running in the opposite direction of Bakugo, who chased him down. He tried to dodge Bakugo's attacks, which consisted of more than just lasers. "Get back here, Deku!" Bakugo shouted, "Don't run like a coward." Peter took sight of his actions and placed his gun on the ground. Momo looked at him curiously as he lifted his sleeve up, revealing a silver bracelet with a trigger that popped out. Putting his fingers together, Peter shot a web out and grabbed Bakugo's leg, pulling him down. "Hey! What gives?" Bakugo shouted, following the web down to Peter. "Oh, I see. We're using quirks now." "Fine by me." Bakugo pointed one of his palms down, firing off a small explosion that sent him flying toward Peter. Momo quickly stands in front of him, and a shield suddenly pops out from her skin, forming in her hands. Bakugo lands right on the shield, bouncing off and stumbling in the opposite direction. "I guess we're using quirks now," Momo said, helping Peter onto his feet. "This just got a lot harder." "That's what makes it fun," Peter shouted as he jumped into the air and shot out a web, swinging away. He bounces himself off the nearest wall and propels forward above the enemy combatants. He fired down a barrage of lasers, taking out more than half the opposing team for a few seconds. He stuck to the wall just in time to see his enemies groaning in annoyance. "Hey! Don't be mad, just use your quirks," Peter shouted to them. "I like things fair." Once the opponent's gear had turned back on, they gave each other grins of determination. Todoroki was the first to take off on a slide of ice, with Tenya speeding not far behind him. As he was running, however, Tenya suddenly slipped and fell off the acid Mina created, and she slid away laughing. The supervisors of the laser tag arena were beginning to panic due to the potential damage the students may cause. However, Overcast held up her hand to them for reassurance. "They're fine. None of them are that reckless." Their faces lit up from one of Bakugo's explosions. "Most of them," she finished. She grabbed a seat and smiled, looking at the students as they continued their fun. There was a clear smile on Peter's face. It was nice that he was able to find some happiness after the chaos yesterday. These kids may want to be heroes, but right now they are still just kids. With how much fun Peter seemed to be having, she wondered when the last time was that he spent time being a kid. Seeing that smile on his face made her happy either way. Chapter 11, Appreciation. The sun was beginning to set now, just as the students of 1A began leaving the massive arcade. They were smiling and laughing with each other, a bit of adrenaline still running through them after the laser tag. Bakugo still hung in the back, not bothering to interact with any of his classmates. Peter hung around Momo and Izuku, talking about the day overall. "I'm really happy you guys brought me here, it means a lot to me." Peter smiled. "I really needed this." "Of course." Momo said, "We're friends, so we look out for each other. Besides, everyone else had a good time too. Even Bakugo, whether he admits it or not." "I can hear you," he shouts from the back. Many of them laughed as Bakugo simply scoffed and turned his head. Peter was glad he came today and was able to grow closer to his classmates. He felt that his bond with them had grown stronger, at least with a few of them. "Peter?" Overcast called out to him as she caught up with the group. "Hey, I was hoping we could talk for a minute." Peter looked to his friends for a moment, seeing what their faces thought of this. "You guys go ahead." "Izuku, I'll see you at home." "I'll be fine with Overcast." "Oh, okay," he said, walking away with the rest of his class. "See you at school, Peter." Momo called out, "Bye-bye." Mina jumped and waved. Peter waved to them with a smile on his face. Seeing them walking toward the sunset was a beautiful sight, making him happy to have met them at all. Besides Bakugo's attitude, they were an enjoyable group to spend time with. He felt closer with some more than others, but there was still a sense of security with them. Peter turned around and faced Overcast with his hands in his pockets. "So, what did you want to talk about?" "Questions I'm required to ask," Overcast replied. "I'm sorry. I know you just got it off your mind, but I need to ask about what happened yesterday." Peter's expression dropped as he tried to maintain eye contact. "What do you want to know?" "Those villains came for you, Peter. They wanted you out of the picture. You weren't even going after them while you're here, so why did they want you dead so badly?" Peter was silent. There wasn't a lot that he could really say to her without talking about the stones. He couldn't let anyone else know about them unless he trusted them or didn't have a choice. "I thought about this for a while," Overcast continued, "and I realize maybe it has something to do with whatever you aren't telling the police." "What do you mean?" "They know there's more to it." The rhino went on about some stone he was looking for, before the bug stopped him. Peter gulped, his heart sinking into his chest as she continued to speak. "What do you know about this stone he was talking about, Peter? I really need you to work with me." He tried to get a word out but found it impossible to speak. He just couldn't bring himself to talk about anything. It goes against everything that he is. Telling her about the stones would only put more people in danger, and he wasn't going to let that happen. "I don't know anything, Overcast. I'm sorry, but I just don't know anything. I stopped Rhino when I first arrived, that's it. I don't know anything about some stone, or why they are here at all. It scares me just as much as everyone else." She examined his answer with her arms crossed, taking notes on his body language and facial expression. She knew something was amiss, but she wasn't going to pry it out this way. She needed another tactic to get the answer. Unfortunately, any idea she has aren't something she herself can pull off. "Okay," she sighed, "how about I walk you home? It'll be dark before we get back." "Okay, lead on." The walk back home was a silent one as the moon lifted into the sky. Peter kept to himself as Overcast kept an eye on their surroundings. She worried that she may have made things awkward with her question earlier, but it was a necessary evil. She was told to ask about it, whether he was comfortable or not. The police were cracking down on this case, trying to figure out where these new villains may be, and his input could help them. However, it can only help if he's willing to share. Overcast looked up into the sky and sighed. "Nice night, huh?" Peter looked at her briefly before turning back to the path before them. "Yeah, it is. Have you ever actually been around the town?" "Not really, been so focused on school." Of course, this wasn't completely true. He had seen a lot of the city when traversing it during his outings as Spiderman. "Why do you do this, Peter?" "Go to school, I mean. Train to be a hero?" she asked. Peter didn't look at her, or even change his movement pattern. He had been asked this before, and again he didn't feel like answering. Overcast simply sighed and looked forward. My family was murdered. Peter jerked his head toward her with widened eyes. What? My family, she continued, they were murdered by villains. These people were granted powerful abilities and they chose to use them, to kill. I was young at the time, but I still feel I could have done something. I was only spared because I did what my parents said and hid. My mom, dad, and brothers, all murdered in a villain's rampage. I've lived with that guilt for a very long time. I dedicated my life to stopping people with powers from hurting others. She looks at him with glossy eyes, the memory still painful for her. How about you? Who did you lose? How did you know? I know what it looks like, when you're eternally grieving inside. Peter sighed, his own eyes becoming glossy as he looked to the ground. My uncle. Once, I wanted to use my powers to win some money while wrestling. I won match after match because of my powers. It went all the way to my head, though. One night, someone robbed the wrestling arena, and I let them get away because I didn't think it was my problem, but... Peter clenched his fist. That same man later murdered my uncle on the street. He'd still be alive if I had just done the right thing. Overcast listened carefully to him, shifting herself closer to him for comfort. You want to make up for it. I get that, I really do. And I'm going to guess it's why you won't talk about what happened yesterday, right? You feel it's your responsibility and yours alone. He didn't answer, but she had a feeling she was spot on. The two of them stopped, just at the street crossing. Peter didn't make eye contact despite her gestures. Peter, you can talk to me. We want to help you stop these guys. You want to stop them for me, he blurted out, immediately regretting it. So, you do feel it's your fight, she confirmed. Peter, please. Let us protect you. He couldn't bring himself to meet eyes with her. Of course, he wanted badly to open up about what was going on. Only himself really knew what was at stake. As much as he wanted help, he knew it was better to go at it alone. Can we just go home now? He asked. It was clear this was their stopping point in the conversation. Try as she might, there wasn't much more she could get out of him tonight. Okay, she sighed. Come on, I'll take you back. Elsewhere. Shocker's fist collided with the wall of the empty room, earning a flinch from his comrades. She must be insane, he said. Peter Parker has 2 of the stones and we're just here twiddling our thumbs. Why don't we kill him now? Because she has a plan, Goblin said. Believe me, I want him dead too. But she insists that it's all a part of her grand scheme. The villains stood roughly in a circle, talking across to one another. Hydro-Man sat in the corner fiddling with his powers, while the Vulture hung on a bar high above. He watched the show from above as the villains grew angrier with each passing second. You told me where he was because you wanted him out of the way, Shocker stated. Now you're ready to submit to this woman? Since when do you take orders? I don't. Goblin shouted back, believe me, I have a plan of my own. A new plan, in fact. But we need to wait until the right day comes. I've been communicating with the other villains of this city and working out a sort of deal. Shocker crossed his arms, lifting an eyebrow under his mask. Go on. Our accomplice believes Peter can find the stones faster and more efficient than we can. However, I believe that having him on the chessboard only complicates our strategy. We could have killed him and been done, then the stones would have been ours. Of course, I'm not stupid. I recognize my own mistakes. Goblin fiddled with the infinity gauntlet over his hand. I realize we rushed into the police station. We were eager to kill him once and for all. This time, however, we are going to be more patient. Her and I may disagree on many things, but perhaps a more tactical approach is what we need after all. Goblin roamed the dark streets of the city with a massive black cloak over his body. It wasn't much protection as he was still massive, but it was enough to cover him under the midnight moon. He stepped into the alley of a supposedly abandoned building, waiting there with his arms crossed. Thanks to his heightened senses, he knew what was coming to meet him. A portal of black opens, and out steps 2 beings. One was a man in a suit, whose head was nothing more than black smoke and big eyes. The other was smaller and pale, with dismembered hands sticking to his face and body. The pale man was slouched as he addressed the goblin. So, what exactly can you offer? He spoke. His voice sounded like he was a child holding back excitement. You're a part of the League of Villains, as you call yourself. Goblin smirked. Let's say I have villains of my own to offer you. I heard rumors of a little mission you're planning on taking. I believe we can both benefit from my help. The pale man scratched his head. How many villains are we talking about? Goblin smirked. A whole world's worth. The next day, homeroom came rolling in the next day, and everyone had been talking about the night before. Some considered going back to the arcade again, others complained about what they didn't like. Izuku and Peter came in at the same time, taking their seats as they waited for the time to go by. As soon as Peter sat down, Mina came rushing to him with a smile. "Hi, Peter," she exclaimed. "Did you have fun yesterday?" "Because I had a blast." Peter laughed and greeted her. "I had fun, Mina." "Thank you." "What did you do afterwards?" "I went home and watched some sci-fi movies. The laser tag game just got me so pumped." "What movies?" "Just some old ones I found laying around." Her eyes lit up. "Hey, maybe I could show them to you. It would be fun to watch them together." Momo's voice suddenly butted in, reminding them that she was sitting next to them. "I'm sure Peter will probably have homework anyway." "Well, not tonight actually," Peter said. "Got some done ahead of time. I had nothing better to do. So, I probably could watch them with her." "Are we talking about movies?" Eureka walked toward them, gaining interest in their words. "I like sci-fi too. Which ones are we talking about?" "Heart in the Vortex," Mina replied. "It's a romance sci-fi that's based off the book series." "Ooh. I'd like to see that." Momo quickly stood up. "We should all probably get to our seats, should we not?" The other girls looked down, but nodded. "Okay," Mina said, "but I'm holding you to that, Peter." "Noted," he said. Just as Mina began to go back to her seat, Momo moved close to her and gently took her arm. "Hey, do you like Peter? You just seem to get attached to him when he's around." Mina looks between Momo and Peter before smiling. "I could probably ask you the same thing. But I don't know, I just like talking to him. He makes me feel appreciated." "Appreciated?" she questioned, just as their teacher came walking in. "Yaoyorozu, Ashido, sit down," he scolded. "Yes sir," they exclaimed before jumping to their seats. Momo still looked at Mina, wondering what she meant about feeling appreciated. Lunch rolled around, and everyone rushed to the cafeteria. Mina grabbed her food and started looking for a place to sit. Normally, she finds herself sitting with Kirishima or Tsu. However, she lit up when she saw Peter sitting not far from her. With a smile on her face, she power walked over to him. Sitting with him was Izuku, Eureka, and Tenya as they always were. "Hi, Peter," Mina said, earning their attention. "Is it okay if I sit with you guys today?" "Oh, well, it's fine with me," Peter said as he looked to his friends. "Guys?" "Sure," Eureka said. "We're all friends here." Mina eagerly sat down across from Peter, placing her tray down firmly. "What are we talking about?" she asked. "We're anticipating today's class with all might," Tenya answered. "It's supposed to be another rescue mission in ground beta. However, the scale is supposed to be higher this time around." "Give me a chance to redeem myself," Peter said, "since I failed it last time." "Oh, sounds fun," Mina said. "Is it a one-person rescue, or teams?" "I think teams?" Izuku questioned, but we never got a straight answer. All Might likes to have his surprises. Peter eyed Mina with suspicion, but not in any way that accused her of a crime. It seemed strange that she wanted to sit with them since she never has before. "How come you aren't sitting with Kirishima or Tsu today?" Mina perked. "I don't know, I guess I want to talk to my other friends more. Even though we're one class, we seem to stick to a group of 3 or 4 each. I just want to change that." Peter raised his eyebrows and smiled. "Well, that's really sweet of you, Mina. You're a good person." Mina was taken aback, and her cheeks began to blush. It was somewhat harder to see it against her pink skin, but it was still noticeable overall. She straightened the tie on her uniform and tried to air her shirt out through the collar. "Aw, stop, you're making me fluster." The other 4 laughed along with her, making her joyful and proud. Momo had watched from her own table, beginning to understand what she meant earlier that day. Jealous as she was happy for her. The hero class came around, and everyone gathered their gear together. All Might took them to ground beta, standing in front of the massive doors. He stood there with his fists on his waist, towering over his students. "All right. Today's rescue shall be in teams of 5. The heroes, and the villains." He points to the buildings in the fake city. "One of these buildings has a nuclear bomb that will go off in half an hour. The heroes must find and disable it before the city is wiped out, and the villains need to stop them. Clear?" Clear! They all shouted. Now, do we have volunteers for the heroes of the first round? Many of the students shot their hands up, some at the same time. Only a few managed to beat them in time, and All Might called them out. Peter, Tenya, Mina, Suyu, and Toru. Woo! Toru shouted from the back, making everyone look at her. How she managed to beat them was confusing, considering her quirk made her invisible 24/7. She was nothing more than a floating pair of gloves. All right, All Might said, our hero team will be sent in, without knowing who was put on the villains team. Each group will be given earphones to communicate with their allies. Since Peter makes the numbers uneven, his team will be put at a disadvantage this round. The villain team will have 6 members instead of 5. Understood? Yes, sir. They shouted. The 5 were let inside as the door shut on them. Immediately they took position in an alleyway, kneeling with each other. So, we should discuss quirks first, Spiderman suggested. We need to know who can handle what. Sue was the first to speak. My frog quirk lets me maneuver pretty quickly. You, me and Tenya are probably the best for traversing the city quickly. Good point, Tenya said. Mina's acid could provide use against our enemies too. Remember how she made me slip during laser tag? Perhaps she could do the same for everyone else. You're lucky I dumbed the intensity of that acid, Mina smirked, or that would have stung a lot. What about me? Toru asked, what can I do? Your invisibility, Spider-Man addressed, you're the best chance of finding the bomb undetected. If you're careful, we can keep them busy while you win the round for us. Oh, wow! She exclaimed, now I'm super excited. And kind of nervous, it's not often I get to be this useful. You'll be fine, Spider-Man smiled, our opponents will be here soon, let's get to work. Everyone stood up, except for Toru who was stopped by Mina's hand on her shoulder. As the others walked away, Mina gave her a serious look. Everything okay? Toru asked. Yeah. Mina answered, it's just, I know what that's like. Know what's like? Not feeling useful. She didn't say anything else as she stood up and peered out the alleyway. Toru only stared in confusion. It wasn't often she saw this side of Mina, as someone more vulnerable. She was always so cheery. What exactly was on her mind? Everyone suddenly covered their ears at the sound of sonic waves rushing through the streets. Down the street, a girl with short dark blue hair had her hands in her pockets. From her ears hung what seemed to be earphone jacks, which stretched and plugged into her boots. From her boots, massive sound waves escaped and covered the streets. Windows shattered and littered the area in glass and debris. I'm right here, she said, come get me. It's Kyoka, Tenya whispered into the calms, getting past her will be difficult. Spider-Man's senses went off, as he looked in the direction of Mina and Toru. Girls, look out! Toru looked behind her, and immediately jumped forward to tackle Mina out of the way. Landing behind them was Momo with a club in her hand. She landed elegantly, standing up and facing her side to them. Mina stood up as well, staring her down with determination. It was time to prove she was worth the appreciation. Chapter 12, Endangerment. Toru could only watch as Mina and Momo stared each down. Somehow, she could sense a tension she didn't realize was there before. It wasn't so much hatred, but rather rivalry. It was as if they were both excited to face one another. This wasn't a side of Mina she had seen often, someone so calm and determined. Usually she was a lot like herself, fun, bubbly and happy. But what changed? What was pushing her today? Mina looked back at Toru, pointing to the street. Get out of here and find that bomb. I got this. Oh, okay, she said, rushing off as quickly as she could. Momo tried to move after her, but Mina remained in her path. Every time she tried to move around, Mina made sure to stay in the way and block her exit. Are you sure you can take me in a fight? Momo asked, almost sounding genuine. Are you sure you can hold out? Mina retorted with a grin. Kind of funny how you chose to be a villain today. You've been acting strange, like when you asked how I felt about Peter. So, that's none of your business. Mina rushed forward and threw her hand forward to throw acid. Momo quickly created a hand shield and blocked the substance. Just as she lifted her shield back up, Mina landed a punch to her gut and sent her stumbling backwards. When she came for another punch, Momo blocked it with her shield and rebutted the blow. Mina's knuckles felt bruised after colliding with the metal. She didn't have time to feel the pain as her opponent swept her legs and sent her to the ground. Mina only just managed to roll out of the way as Momo brought her club down. In a panic, she threw more acid to make her enemy jump back, creating a separation of at least 2 yards. "It doesn't matter if I can't take you in a fight," Mina said as she stood up. "I just need to keep you occupied. Well, let's see if you can stay conscious for long enough." She rushed forward as the two continued to trade blows. The two creature-based superheroes stuck to the walls of the building, jumping and swinging away from each of Kyoka's sonic blasts. They found themselves several stories high, and still unable to climb out of range of her power. "She has to have some weakness, right?" Spider-Man asked, looking at Sue, who stuck to the wall just a few yards from him. "As long as she stays plugged in, she can keep blasting us," Sue answered. "The faster her heartbeat, the more powerful her sound waves. Tiring her out only makes it worse for us. We need to either unplug her or plug up those speakers in her boots." Kyoka shot another sound wave at the base of the building, causing the windows to shatter as the waves moved up the building. Both Sue and Spider-Man jumped across to the building on the other side of the street and stuck there. Sue slid down a yard as she landed but managed to hold her grip. "She can't target us both, right?" Spider-Man asked. "We need to move parallel to each other, give her more than one target to aim at." "Roger!" she shouted, immediately jumping away. Her long tongue shot out and attached itself to the nearest wall, pulling her toward it and swinging above Kyoka. Just as she tried to aim a sonic wave, Spider-Man swung above her coming from a different direction. She found herself twisting and turning to try and aim at them. Every time she gets one in view, they leave as another comes from another angle. It didn't give her time to fire anything off. Spider-Man came swinging in toward her, shooting off 2 webs that stuck to her boots. The webs covered them just as she tried to fire off sonic waves. The recoil imploded on itself and sent her flying backwards, crashing into the door of a stray car. Spider-Man and Sue landed next to each other, giving a high five and a bright smile. His spider sense sounded loud in his head. Quickly he grabbed Sue by the hip and jumped into the air just as a massive shadow-like creature slammed into the ground. They landed a few yards away and stared their enemy down as the shadow returned to them. "Tokoyami," Sue confirmed, "we have the advantage because of the daylight, but he's still dangerous." Tokoyama's stance was like a pencil, as if nothing could falter him. His body was covered by a large black cloak, but his head is what stuck out. His head held the appearance of a bird with yellow beak, red eyes and neck, and black on the top. "I've been waiting to face off against you," Tokoyami said. "I admire your skill, Peter. I'm curious how quickly you can avoid my attacks." "Sue," Spider-Man said quietly, "it's likely this is a distraction." He and Kyoka both came out in the open. That's 2 of 6 from their team. "I'll take care of him. You need to get going and help the others however you can." Sue nodded before jumping away as quickly as she could. "You've been attracting a lot of attention," Tokoyami said. "Those villains have been after you. You must be pretty good if they want you dead that badly. Are you sure you're up for this? Is that an actual concern there?" Spider-Man asked. "Yes, actually," he confirmed with a stern look. "I can't imagine the stress has left you so easily, despite yesterday's activities. While I hope they at least helped, you seem like someone who lingers on the past." Spider-Man sighed, but kept his guard up. "I guess I am. I can't help it, the past is what defines me. If I don't linger you may lose your way." "I get it. It must be tough to carry the world like that." Spider-Man's shoulders finally dropped. "Yeah, are we actually going to fight?" "If you want. I just thought you needed a moment of calm, to remind you things aren't all bad." Spider-Man smiled under the mask. "Thanks, Tokoyami. Want a first shot?" Tokoyami laughed. "Sure." In one swift motion, his shadow escaped from his body and launched itself toward his enemy. Spider-Man leapt forward and let the palms of his hands slide across it as he moved to the side. He pushed off his heel and ran forward, jumping over the shadow as it came back around. As he leapt into the air, he threw a kick to the side of his head. Tokoyami went into a quick shoulder roll, standing up as Spider-Man came rushing at him again. His shadow grabbed his enemy by the legs and threw him into the air, watching him ascend the building. Spider-Man stopped his ascension by clinging to the building wall. The tension built by the contact charged energy into his kinetic gauntlets, making them glow blue. "I hope the others are okay," he muttered, before leaping back down with his fist winded up. Toru sprinted as fast as she could, alternating between jogging to catch her breath. It was hard to spot her unless you were looking for her gloves or boots. Unfortunately, her classmates knew exactly what to look for. To play it safe, she kept close to the buildings for a quick alleyway escape. In the distance, she could hear other battles going on. It made her sad that she couldn't help them, as her powers weren't meant for combat. A figure suddenly jumped in front of her, extending their arms to block her path. He was tall and muscular, with hair that stooped down in front of his face. He wore a mask that covered every facial feature below his eyes, and his suit was sleeveless with shades of blue. On his arm sockets were several tentacles that shifted and changed into whatever part of his body he chose. For this instance, he showed several arms that connected like wings to block Tora's path. "Oh, hi Mizo," she said awkwardly, "nice to see you. See what I did there?" "Yep," he said, his mouth forming from one of his tentacles. He attempted to throw a punch at her with one of his arms, but she quickly ducked under it and ran past him. It was hard to aim at her when there wasn't much to see. Still, he tried to chase after her despite how hard it was to keep an eye on her. Toru turned a corner, taking her gloves off and throwing them to the side. She had to slow into hops to remove her boots, then ran back into a sprint. When Mizo turned the corner to follow her, he noticed the clothing left on the ground. "Great," he said sarcastically, "if you're gonna do that every time, why bother having a costume at all? It makes me feel awkward otherwise, okay?" She shouted, regretting it afterwards. "There you are!" Mizo charged forward toward the sound. Toru went into a panic as she ducked under him, sticking her leg out to trip him. He went stumbling into a pile of garbage, landing on his face. Toru cheered for herself as she continued to run away. "I can do this," Toru thought, "everyone is counting on me. I can't let them down." Mina's acid melted the club with one fell swoop. Momo had to drop it as the melting reached the handle. With her guard wide open, Mina rushed in and threw an uppercut. Momo was barely able to dodge and back roll away from her. The two stared each other down as they took a moment to catch their breath. "You're fighting pretty hard," Momo said. "You sure you can keep this up? If you can, so can I." Mina jumped and rushed forward, generating acid around her arms. Momo quickly ducked under her and pushed her shoulders against her stomach, lifting her up and throwing her over. She landed on her back with a massive thud, the wind getting knocked out of her. Vibrations rushed through her shoulders as she arched them to dull the pain. Momo patrolled around her, forming a staff in her hand and holding it behind her arm. She could easily take Mina out now, but she wanted to see what she was going to do. The pink hero rolled onto her stomach and pinned her palms to the ground, acid building on the back of her hands and up her arms. She was getting angry. "I've never seen you this angry," Momo said with actual concern. "What's happening to you?" "Shut up!" she shouted, catching Momo off guard. "You think that you can have everything?" Mina jumps to her feet, falling back down on one knee. "Sure, you got in through recommendation, but I got in too." She pushed herself onto her feet, clenching her fists tightly. She was getting angrier, and more fired up with each second. A moment weighed on her mind, sitting on her shoulders like a heavy scarf. Despite its weight, she kept it close for warmth and comfort. It hurt her just as it kept her safe, and its power came from a single sentence. "I like that about you." The acid started dripping from Mina's fingers, making her skin deadly to the touch. The ground beneath her began to deteriorate as the deadly liquid made contact. Momo held the staff with both hands and kept it in front of her for protection. "I know I'm not the strongest, or the fastest," Mina said, "but I got into you. So there has to be a reason, right?" She held her fists up. "I'll prove to him I'm worth it." She charged forward and threw her arm in a circular motion. The acid escaped her skin in massive clumps, forcing Momo to dodge downwards. As she brought her torso to the ground, Mina lifted her foot and kicked Momo upwards. She sent her into a backwards roll as she barely managed to recover before Mina came at her again. She held out her hand to try and stop her, but her palm burned at the touch of her skin. She recoiled and pulled back as she gained space away from her enemy. The burn on her palm was red, but not enough to scar. "You lowered your acid intensity," Momo stated, breathing heavily. "Why?" "If I used its full throttle," Mina began, "I'd burn right down to your bones." Momo looked into her eyes as she became glossy. She was beginning to understand where her anger was coming from with every punch and kick. There was desperation, and a struggle for approval. She wanted to prove herself, more than anything else. "Mina," Momo began as she created gloves for her hands, "what's wrong?" Nothing! She shouted as she charged forward. Mina threw her fists at Momo, but she quickly caught her arms and held them stiff. Her palms were protected by her newly made gloves, resistant to the acid's touch. Mina tried to struggle out of her grip, readying herself to start kicking. Mina! Calm down, let me go. I have to win. Why? Mina finally stopped, tears running down her face and burning off her skin. Her legs became weak as she fell to her knees, Momo lowering down with her. Momo looked over to her struggling friend. What's eating away at you? You always seem so happy and cheerful, so what's changed that today? She didn't want to just open up to Momo right then and there, especially in the middle of a competition. However, there was just too much weighing her down and she was being offered solace. Her shoulders were still tense, but everything else had given out. Jumping to the roof above them, Spiderman landed on the edge and stuck there with a pant. He had been bruised and worn out, but he was still moving despite it all. Looking down, he saw Momo holding Mina's arms. At first glance, he assumed she was in trouble and started crawling down the wall for a surprise attack. It's because of Peter, Mina said while choking on her tears. Spider-Man stopped moving at the mention of his true name, still too high up to be noticed by his classmates. Instead of intervening, he stuck there and listened to their conversation. Mina didn't bother to wipe her tears, as her acid skin burned them away as they fell. Her shoulders had finally dropped, she couldn't keep being angry anymore. Everyone else could fuel their strength with anger, but she just couldn't. She didn't understand how they all did it. How do they become stronger using anger? All she became was weaker, something she had been more afraid of lately than ever. Growing up, Mina managed to speak, only faintly yet enough for Peter to hear up above. People took one look at me and thought I would become a great hero. My skin, my powers, people thought I would be amazing. Maybe it went to my head, or maybe I just liked the attention. She shut her eyes to stop the tears. When I came to the Udata, things changed. Momo saw the acid vanish from her skin, confirmed when the tears stopped burning away. She removed her gloves and started rubbing her shoulder as she continued to talk. I was surrounded by so many people with better and more flashy powers. Everyone was leagues ahead of me, you included. So, even though I got into Class 1A, I sometimes feel like I just fade into the background. Mina, that's not true. It is though, she retorted. Everyone sticks to their own status quo from weakest to strongest. Most popular to least. And I just wanted to feel appreciated, she smiled, her cheeks turning red. That's when I met Peter. He cares about people, and he makes me feel like I'm on par with everyone else. I feel important to him, and it makes me happy. So, when I got to be in his group today, I wanted to prove that I was worth that appreciation. At that moment, she felt bad for Mina. Momo joined today's lesson to see why her vibe had changed, and now she understood it. Had she paid attention to Mina and her feelings, she would have noticed this sooner. In fact, what she said began to make more sense when she thought about it. They may be classmates, but she really didn't talk to her all that much. Mina, I'm so sorry. Momo held her close to give her a comforting hug. I didn't know you were going through that. I should have paid attention to you. I get it. Get, what? Wanting his approval. Mina moved away from the hug and looked her in the eyes. It's kind of obvious I like him, isn't it? Momo chuckled. I like his drive. I admire how hard he works. His morale code is solid, and it speaks to me. I keep trying harder too, so I can impress him. I want him to see him as an equal, and as worthy for him. I guess, we both wanted approval. Mina sniffed to keep her nose from running, rubbing the gunk out of her eyes and smiling. I guess we did. Momo chuckled as well, helping Mina onto her feet. She brushed her pink hair to the side and wiped the rest of her tears away. It appeared they were done fighting each other, as they embraced one another tightly. I won't ignore you, Mina. I promise, she stated, I won't do that to you anymore. You're my friend, after all. Mina smiled. Thank you, Momo. That means a lot to me. Above them, Spiderman climbed up the wall and sat on the roof. He removed his mask and tossed it to the side as tears ran down his face as well. He hadn't paid enough attention to see how they felt about him. Mina was suffering, and he unknowingly helped her feel better. For him, this raised a problem. He knew that he wouldn't always be around. One day, he'll go home and leave everyone behind. When he's gone, who will she have to make her feel that way? Even if her friends make her happy, it's not the same as having a crush or falling in love. The longer he stays, the more cemented his presence becomes. And whether he liked it or not, that was dangerous. Tokoyami jumped onto the roof, ready to attack his prey before he noticed his state of being. He was in no physical or emotional state to fight. Sighing, he withdrew his shadow and walked over to Peter, sitting down next to him. He wasn't too close, just close enough to give him comfort and space. "What's wrong? Did something happen?" Tokoyami asked. "I don't know." Peter spoke quietly, not wanting to alert the girls below. "Mina and Momo, they like me. I don't know just how much, but enough that I impact them emotionally." "Good, or bad impact?" Peter paused. "Good, I think." "Then what's the problem?" He sighed, holding his knees close to his chest. "I'm only here for this semester. I'll be gone at some point. My departure will break their hearts. And even if I could stay, I can't let them." He wiped tears from his face as they fell more rapidly. "If I fall for someone, or someone falls for me, they become endangered. My enemies know who I am now. They may target those who are close to me." He paused to take a deep breath, the tears running on his lips. "We have a pro-hero guarding Izuku and his mother because of me. And I can't add to that list. I can't, and I won't." Tokoyami listened carefully as he stroked his beak. Peter was obviously one to hold the world over his shoulders and refuse to let others help. He believes the weight will crush them if he doesn't hold it alone. Despite being a hero of bright colors, his mind spent much of its time in the dark. "Peter," Tokoyami put a hand on his shoulder, "we cannot always control how we impact other people. We are heroes, and there will be danger all around us. Both Ashido and Yayorozu have abilities they can use to protect themselves. No one here is defenseless. I am." Peter nearly shouted, covering his mouth before he could make too much noise. The tears flowed off the back of his hand, landing on his lap. Peter didn't know where the outburst came from, but it was hurting him inside. His chest felt heavy as he tried to slow his breathing to no avail. The thought of anyone he cared about putting themselves at risk was terrifying to him, almost traumatizing. Peter attempted to continue. "I am." "No, you aren't," Tokoyami tried to retort. "You're strong. Spiderman is strong." His voice rippled. "Peter Parker is weak." The crow sighed and leaned back, looking up at the sky. "You're wrong. Peter Parker is stronger." Peter looked at him quietly, wondering if he was going to continue speaking. He never did. They sat there in silence as the clouds hovered overhead. It was hard for Peter to understand how he was stronger than Spider-Man. The hero had powers and skills that the science nerd didn't. How was he stronger? Why couldn't he understand it? Toru sprinted into the underground train station, jumping onto the tracks as soon as she came in. Looking up, she saw Mizo charge in and look around, not seeing any sign of her presence. "She's getting close to you guys," Mizo said to his group's communicator. "Keep an eye out." "So, we were tricked," Toru thought. "The bomb isn't in a building, it's underground." Careful as not to make a sound, Toru ran off in the only available direction. There were lights at the end of the tunnel, accompanied by a few shadows. By logic, it must have been the rest of their team. There were only two of them, so the others were somewhere outside. As she got closer, she was able to make out who they were. One of them was Denki, wearing his black jacket and pants with lightning designs on it. The other was Mineta, obvious by his short stature and grape-like head. Both of them were good at keeping people away, so she had to be careful. Toru's foot suddenly scratched against some dirt, echoing through the tunnel. "Ha!" Denki said as he turned in her direction. "Ah, screw it," Toru sighed, leaping forward and throwing a hard punch into Denki's face. He went flying down to the ground, frightening Mineta with the sudden attack. She moved quickly and kicked Mineta away before he could peel off any of his sticky spheres. Behind them was the massive bomb prop, with a computer attached to the inside of it. "There!" Toru ran over, just as she found her foot stuck to a sticky sphere. "Hey, ha!" Mineta shouted as he laid on the ground, too tired to get up. "Good luck getting to it now." The sphere stuck to her foot like Velcro. She twisted and pulled without any progress to removal. The computer was just out of her reach, but she still had to try. Stretching her legs out, she pushed her body forward and attempted to reach for the console. Her fingers aimed for the big red button on the side. "Come on, you can do this." she thought, don't let them down. Finally, her finger pressed the button as the sphere stretched and pulled her back to the ground. The computer shut off immediately with a loud noise. No! Mineta shouted, no fair. No fair. I did it. Toru shouted, I won. I mean we won. The intercom turned on, and All Might's voice came ringing through the tunnels. The heroes have won this match. The game is over. After unsticking herself, Toru and the others all met up at the main street of the grounds. She met up with her team and received a massive hug from Mina as they cheered her on. The two teams began to exchange friendly greetings and congratulations. Toru has a hard punch. I was knocked straight down. Didn't think she had it in her. Denki rubbed the back of his neck. I pretty much stood guard the whole time. Getting punched in the face was technically the highlight. I didn't expect you guys to block my speakers, Kyoka smiled. It was pretty clever to distract me and use my power to your advantage. And sending Toru after the bomb was smart too, Mizo said. You guys definitely thought this out way more than us. As everyone talked and laughed, Momo and Mina looked over at Peter. He was keeping himself distant from everyone rather than receiving feedback. Is he okay? Mina asked, do you think something happened? You're his teammate, Momo said with a smile, go ask him. With a nod, Mina strolled her way over to him. As she went to say hi, she suddenly saw the look on his face. It was as though his eyes saw something that hers couldn't. He stared off into space in utter worry and fear. She didn't think his eyes could widen any more than they had. Peter held his arms to protect the emblem on his chest. Peter, she put a gentle hand on his shoulder, startling him. Hey, it's just me. What's wrong? Did something happen? Mina, He tried to speak, but seeing her eyes in all their glory, he couldn't find words that fit. She was too good, too innocent and kind. He didn't want to poison that, he didn't want her to get hurt. Mina, you were great today. He spoke with a stutter. Really, you were awesome. I can't explain how great you are. You need to know that, and I'm sorry. What are you sorry about? My life, Mina, it's dangerous. He looked down at his hands. I have blood on these. Blood that I can't share, or people get hurt. Those villains want me dead and here everyone is trusting me. You're lifting me up and making me better, but I might drag you down with me once I fall. I can't do that to you. You're too good, all of you. She takes a step forward. Peter dash. No! Everyone else suddenly stopped and took notice of Peter's sudden outburst. Upon it, Peter covered his mouth as his eyes became glossy. He didn't mean to shout at her, she had done nothing wrong to him. She didn't deserve his anger and frustrations. I'm sorry, He couldn't. I'm sorry, it's not you, really. I'm sorry. He found no more words in his arsenal and retreated to the entrance of the grounds. Everyone stared in confusion, all but Mina, who stared with concern. Chapter 13, The Storm Before the Calm. The warehouse was filled to the brim with people, big and small. Each of them was dressed so uniquely, you'd never see the same person twice. Thugs, thieves and villains all crowded with one another, throwing their arms into the air and cheering. Clearly, they were excited for something. What it was had only just arrived. The Green Goblin's shoeless foot stomped onto the stage inside the warehouse, where a microphone had been placed for him. As soon as he reached it, the entire room went silent. I am Norman Osborn, but you may call me Goblin, he spoke, his voice echoing through the room. It came to my attention that your employers, the League of Villains, plan an assault on UA's finest. I said, that is a splendid idea, and decided I wanted to add to their little escapade. He grabbed the microphone and began to pace around the stage. I have just as many, if not twice the number of villains on my side than people in this room. With our forces together, we will invade their home, and take their hope away. The thugs cheered for him. All I ask of you is one thing, he grinned, leave your mercy behind. They threw their fists into the air, shouting with enthusiasm. The blue-haired man scratched his head as he stood off to the side, his eyes peering through the dismembered hand on his face. He's far too loud, he said. I don't like him. Patience, Tamira, said the figure beside him, his body nothing more than dark mist contained in clothing, and yellow eyes peering out within them. He has resources that will further us to our goal. All he wants in return is a single child. Is that not a good trade? Tamira continued to scratch his head. What's so special about this Parker kid anyway? Spiders are gross. People kill spiders. Perhaps that is precisely the point. Tamura looked at Goblin, squinting his eyes at him. I don't buy it. They had yet to approach Peter in the classroom as he sat firmly in his seat. His arms were crossed, and his head rested on them. No one had gotten the courage to speak up after yesterday's heroics class. They didn't want to pour salt on the wound, knowing that something was weighing down on him. It was hardest for Mina and Momo, feeling as though they were the cause of his emotional state. They may have come to terms with what they felt, but Peter had yet to do the same. The door of the classroom swung open, and Mr. Aizawa came waltzing in. The moment he entered, he could tell the vibe had been off from its usual cheer. Everyone was conflicted with their emotions, and it was clearer than glass. They weren't like this during yesterday's homeroom, so something must have happened between then and now. Good morning, class, Aizawa greeted. I have a very special announcement for everyone today. A few people perked up to listen, but no one seemed as enthusiastic. All right. Aizawa scoffed. We'll be taking a field trip today to a special location. Now was when people started to listen, Peter included, as he raised his head from his arms. This class will be taught by 3 different instructors, myself and All Might included, Aizawa continued. You'll be doing disasters, shipwrecks, and everything in between. It's rescue training, essentially. The students began to murmur with one another, minus Peter, who stayed reserved from interaction. Sounds fun, huh? Momo spoke to him, catching him off guard. He had almost forgotten he wasn't the only person in the world. Yeah, it sounds fun, he replied, turning his attention back to the front. It was a failed attempt at interaction, but she wasn't going to give up. The training takes place off campus, Aizawa continued, so we'll be taking a bus. You can decide whether to wear your costumes, he said to Peter. Parker, you'll have to stay behind until your protector, Overcast, arrives here to escort you. Clear? He nodded. Clear. The cases popped out of their compartments in the walls, numbered 1 through 21. Students eagerly got up to grab them, running off to the bathrooms to change as quickly as possible. Peter waited until the bulk of the students grabbed their cases before moving to grab his. Inside his case was the watch, hiding his nanosuit safely inside. Behind him was Momo and Mina, looking at each other and wondering who should speak up first. When Peter turned around, he was met with a startle by the 2 young girls before him. They both looked nervous, wanting to say something but unable to find the proper words. Momo, Mina, he greeted, trying his best to remain composed. About yesterday. We were gonna ask about that, Mina said. I didn't mean to upset you. I'm really sorry. Peter sighed. It wasn't you, He paused, searching for the best words. I heard your conversation with Momo. Both the girls' eyes widened now, looking away a second after words from embarrassment. The fact that he heard their confessions only made this more awkward to talk about. Look, Peter sounded sincere to calm them. I admire it, I really do. And I am honestly happy that my influence can improve your lives in some way. It just brought up some things for me. What kind of things? Mina asked. Peter sighed, clicking the watch around his right wrist tightly. When trying to find his answer, the past came back to haunt him. There were a dozen reasons he could give, but he would only confuse them if they were all gifted in one box. I've lost people, Peter finally said, in more ways than one. People have turned on me, people have. He ran his hand over his face. Part of me doesn't want to risk hurting another person I care about, you know? They looked at him with concern, yet comfort. For a moment, they had worried that he would be completely reserved and ignore them altogether. They were grateful to see that he was willing to at least talk about what he was feeling. Peter. Momo put a hand on his shoulder slowly, making sure it was okay to do so. We're sorry you feel like that. Mina and I still need to understand how far our feelings go. To be honest, we don't know if it goes as far as, well, romance. What we do know is that you inspire us to be better. For the moment, it's enough to give you solace. Yeah, Mina smiled, we're heroes, like you. We can protect ourselves, so you don't have to worry about our safety. I know, Peter said, it's just hard. Mina sighed, okay, hug time. Come here, she quickly took a hold of him, squeezing him tightly but without hurting him. Momo quickly joined in the hug and wrapped her arms around them both. Turning red, Peter laughed with a smile on his face. Thanks, Peter said. Despite their efforts, he still felt unsure if this was right. The other students changed into their costumes and left as soon as they could. Peter, however, stayed behind, sitting at his seat in the classroom. It was barren and silent, almost uncomfortable without Bakugo's attitude, or Mineta's complaining. Moments like this allowed his mind to wander to places unhealthy to most. He started to think of his life back home, and what may have changed with his disappearance. His friends and family are surely wondering where he may be, and the other Avengers must feel guilty about it. Likely, Tony would have come up with a cover story. Aunt May probably wouldn't even believe it, she was smarter than that. His train of thought derailed at the sound of a loud beeping coming from his backpack. It was a sound he hadn't heard in well over a few weeks. Hastily, he lifted his backpack onto the desk and unzipped it. Reaching inside, he pulled out his cell phone, vibrating and ringing in his hands. How was it still working, wondered Peter. He kept it charged just in case, but he didn't think it would ring here. The phone hasn't had service since he arrived. In fact, he was lucky he had it on him when he went with the Avengers. He looked at the caller ID, and his heart became heavy. The phone shook in his hands from the shock and anticipation. He wanted to answer right away but became nervous as to what he would say. She must have been worried sick, so he needed to say something to her. Anything. Finally, he answered the call. Aunt May? He exclaimed, "Is that you, Peter?" Aunt May's voice sounded from within the phone, making Peter smile brightly. She sounded scared, and rightfully so. "Aunt May," he said again, tears beginning to form in his eyes as he stood from his seat. "Aunt May, it's so good to hear your voice." "Peter." "Thank God. I've been so worried that something happened to you." She was choking on her own tears. "I'm okay. I'm right here." Aunt May took a moment to let her breathing catch up to her. "Peter, when you didn't come home from school, I was so worried. I thought something horrible had happened to you. Everyone said you might be Dash." Hey. He attempted to calm her down. "I'm here, Aunt May. Listen to my voice, I'm right here." He began to cry. "I'm so sorry I worried you. So much has happened and I can't explain all of it. But I'm trying to find a way home, then I'll explain what I can. I promise." "Peter." She sounded scared again. "Please talk to me, what happened?" It's a long story," he regretted not telling her, but he worried she wouldn't understand. "I just want you to know I'm okay." "But, Peter," she exclaimed, "what happened? Did those men take you?" "No one took me, Aunt May, He suddenly stopped, registering what she said in full. "What men?" There was silence on the other end. Something wasn't quite what it seemed. Peter, reacting to his instincts, made for the door and left the room. There were only a few more seconds of silence before Aunt May called for him again, wondering why he said nothing. He simply continued to reply with "everything is going to be okay" and kept walking through the building. Eventually, he found his way to the teacher's lounge, keeping the phone on his ear. "Aunt May," he started, "how have you been since I left? Everything okay?" He entered the room, where two figures had been talking with one another on the couches. One was All Might, reduced to his weaker form. The other was the principal, the little mink he had met a few weeks prior. They seemed a bit surprised to see him but said nothing when they saw he was on the phone. "I've been all right, Peter, for the most part," Aunt May spoke slowly. "Honestly, I've been devastated since you left." "I know, I'm sorry." He quickly covered the phone with his other hand and whispered to All Might, "Laptop." All Might didn't fully understand what was going on, but he trusted Peter enough to know that it was important. In a bag just next to the couch, he pulled out a small laptop and handed it to Peter. "Cord," he whispered, showing the type of wire his phone took. Principal Nizu didn't hesitate to jump out of his chair and run into the next room, searching through the drawers for the right cord. Peter sat down next to All Might and pulled up the coffee table, opening the laptop. He let All Might log in for him, then quickly took over again. "Aunt May, there's so much I wish I could tell you." Peter continued talking. "There are so many things I've wanted to tell you for a long time, but I've never had the courage to do it. I wish I could explain everything, but all I can say for sure is that everything will be okay." He gave All Might a look. It was a mix of worry, concern and determination. All Might was able to gather what he needed from it and nodded to him. Nizu came zooming into the room with a long white cord, handing it to Peter in silence. He took it and plugged one end into his phone, and the other into the laptop. Immediately he opened a program on his phone and transferred it onto the laptop. A large map popped up on the screen, showing one dot on the school campus, with a percentage building up in the corner. "Where are you, Aunt May?" At home, I assume? He asked. Yes. She hesitated, sounded more scared than ever. I see, he replied, continuing to type. Uncle Ben is there with you, right? There was silence, as if she was trying to figure out what he meant by that. Not wanting to freak out, she went along with it. Yes, we're having tea by the fireplace. Remember what he said once on Christmas? By that fireplace? He said that no matter what happens, he would protect us. Even in death, I remember. She choked on her tears again, just as the percentage on the screen reached 100. He'll protect you, Aunt May. He rested his fingers. Just hang in there. A second dot appeared on the screen. It rested near the entrance of the school, close to the water fountain. She was here. Instinct took over once again, his spider sense ringing fast in his ears. He didn't know what it was, or where it even came from, but that didn't stop him from acting. Quickly he twisted his toes on the ground and leapt at All Might, tackling him and moving them from the couch. Throwing his left wrist out, he shot a web at Nizu and pulled him along with them. Just as they had moved from the couches, the wall of the room collapsed in a small explosion. Peter rolled into a recovery and held All Might to his feet, while Nizu recovered on his own, almost hitting the wall. As the smoke began to clear, All Might quickly entered his strong form, his muscles grew and expanded, while his hair stood up tall. Peter had no time to press the button on his watch before a long pillar of sand came rushing in, grabbing him and pulling him out of the room. All Might chased after him a second later, leading them into the hall where Peter was held in the air. Don't move, hero! A figure shouted. His arm was partially turned to sand, holding Peter in the air and covering his nose and mouth. He wore a striped shirt and tan jeans, his hair cut small. Below him was a small pile of sand that dripped from his body. Let the boy go, villain! All Might shouted, or I will have to use force upon you. Peter was running out of air with each second. If All Might wasn't careful, he could hurt him as well as the sand villain. Take your best shot, hero! The Sandman shouted, go ahead, I'll be fine. The web head is my meat shield. Despite the smile he kept on his face, All Might gritted his teeth in anger. He couldn't use his full power, or he would hurt both rather than one. The villain seemed to be made of sand, possibly meaning his physical form was fragile. A lighter attack might be enough, and not hurt young Parker in the process. All Might shifted his right foot back, and winded his fist up, but not too much. Quickly he punched his fist forward, and a gust of concentrated wind went flying from his arm. The powerful blast struck the Sandman directly in his chest. His form collapsed quickly, and grains of sand went flying backwards. Peter fell to his knees and rolled forward, immediately pressing the button on his watch. The nanobots covered his body and formed his suit in a matter of seconds as he took his place next to All Might. Are you all right? All Might asked. Yeah, I'm okay. You? He replied. Could be better. All Might clenched his fist. I worked myself to the bone today, too much hero work. I'm supposed to be with the kids on their field trip, but I needed to rest. I don't know how long I can hold this form. Just hold back then, I'll handle it. I've fought Sandman before. His spider sense went off again, causing him to turn around at the sound of stomping, though he's probably not the only one here. He said. The two heroes jumped to the side as two knives struck the ground before them. Quickly picking them up was a man dressed in strange clothing. Much of his outfit consisted of animal skin designs. His facial hair added to his jungle aesthetic. Equipped to several parts of his body were knives and other hunting weapons, including a rifle on his back. How long have I hunted you, Spider-Man? The man asked with a Russian accent. Perhaps today I will finally catch my prey. Craven? Spider-Man questioned, seriously? Did Norman just bring everyone here? Yes, in fact. But not all of us came for you. Did they come to finally shave that monstrosity you call a mustache? His comment immediately earned him a knife barreled for his face. All Might was quickly able to move his hand and catch the knife before it struck, crushing it in his palm and shattering the blade. Sandman launched a sand fist at the duo as Spider-Man dodged the attack while All Might took it with ease. All Might launched himself forward and threw his fist at Sandman, who immediately turned to sand and caught his fist in his chest. He only struggled for a second until he was able to free his arm, jumping back from the villain as he reformed. I can see how you became so good, All Might said to Peter. These villains certainly know what they are doing. I don't know if I should take that as a compliment or not, Spider-Man retorted. An explosion of air zoomed by the two heroes, plowing through the villains that opposed them. When the unknown figure passed by the Sandman, he fell apart and the grains of sand fell everywhere. Craven went flying into the wall, incapacitated temporarily. Spiderman covered his face from the wind as he looked up toward the end of the hallway. Standing there, out of breath, was Tenya wearing his costume, without the helmet. His glasses were barely holding on from the momentum he had been moving at. "Tenya?" Spiderman shouted, "What are you doing here?" "The others," Tenya shouted back, "from the field trip. The campus is under attack by villains." All Might's smile suddenly dropped. The change in his vibe sent shivers down Peter's spine, as if a faint darkness ignited in the hero of light. "Midoriya," All Might muttered, "we must get to them." "Go!" Spider-Man commanded, "We can do this. They need your help." All Might did not hesitate after the reassurance and sped off in an instant. His exit created a blast of wind that broke all the windows in the hall, knocking Craven back down just as he got to his feet. Spider-Man quickly backflipped over him and shot webs at his feet, pinning him to the ground and ceasing his movement. When he looked over to Tenya, he saw Sandman reforming behind him. There was no time to shout a warning, so Spider-Man web-zipped over and tackled Tenya through the broken window, just as Sandman tried to approach them. The two landed on the ground outside, with Sandman looking down from above. "Tenya," Spider-Man helped his friend up, "find as many pros as you can and meet up with All Might. I have a feeling they'll need help." "But what about you?" Tenya argued, "I saw several other villains on my way in." "You can't fight them all. I've fought a lot of them before." "But Tenya Ida, do as I say." His sharp snap caused Tenya to recoil, but not in understanding. Adjusting his glasses, Tenya took off at quick speed, leaving a gust of wind behind. Just as he left, Sandman jumped down to ground level and faced Spider-Man with a devilish grin. "So, Sandy," Spider-Man started, his hands on his hips, "am I gonna have to take a shower after this again? Because let me tell you, I hate picking sand out of my costume." "Sorry, Webhead, but today that sand will be stained with your blood," Sandman shouted. "You comic book washouts aren't smart enough to put all this together. I assume Goblin is behind this." Sandman laughed, "You have no idea what you are in for. There are several dozen villains on the premises, and nearly half of them are gunning for you. Better think twice before assuming you'll leave here alive." Okay, but I'm gonna need like 3 minutes tops to think about it twice, maybe 3 times because I'm an overachiever." Sandman gritted his teeth and charged at the arachnid. Kendo twiddled her pencil between her fingers as she stared down at the paper. The questions on them weren't that hard, rather her mind was traveling elsewhere. She hadn't seen much of Peter since the incident at the police station. What was he up to right now? Heroics class should be happening for him right now. He was probably showing everyone up without even realizing it. He's too humble for his own good, she thought. He was a good hero, though somewhat of a smart aleck when in costume. Yet, she liked that about him. He knew how to keep the spirits up even in a bleak situation. It made her smile whenever he thought of him, which was a lot. The building had begun to shake suddenly, dust fell from the ceiling above them. The students murmured to one another as their teacher stood up from his front desk. His blonde hair stood up, and his attire showed a vibe that showed his interest in show business. "Mr. Yamada," a student asked, "what's going on?" "No reason to panic," he said. "I'm sure that it was nothing." The building shook again, this time with much more intensity. "On second thought," Yamada panicked, "we'll be evacuating to the front yard instead. Please line up in an orderly fashion." The window beside them suddenly combusted, glass fell everywhere as the wall came apart at the seams. The students ducked under their chairs to hide from the debris, managing to avoid most of it. Kendo had simply enlarged her hands and blocked most of the mess, save for the dust that went into her eyes. She had to close them, but still found them irritated and crying. A figure stepped through the dust, wearing a green and yellow costume. The prime color was green, while a yellow lightning design ran down his body. His mask revealed his eyes and mouth, with several pointy bits of fabric sticking out above his forehead and down his face. "I can feel sparks flying in here," the man shouted. "It's no fun if everyone stands still. Get up and run." He lifted his hands into the air, and electricity escaped from his fingertips. The sparks fired everywhere, striking a few of the students who hid. Everyone panicked and began to rush out the front door, while the teacher stayed behind and faced him. "You're in for a wild ride, my friend." Yamada pointed at him, speaking flamboyantly. "You can't just come in here and do what you want. Prepare to be bested by the pro hero present me dash. The villain shot a lightning blast at him, electrifying his entire body. I'm sure you are a pro, the villain grinned, but I'm better. Yamada fell to the ground, twitching from the attack as the villain stepped over him. Kendo rushed through the halls, trying to squeeze her way past the terrified students. The halls were filled with teenagers all trying to get through to the exit. They were pressed against one another, practically unable to move. Kendo was afraid to use her powers and hurt them, though it may be the only way to get through. She looked outside through the hall window and saw a sight that made her heart beat fast. Standing outside was the arachnid hero, fighting someone whose body had turned to sand. They were in a powerful clash of attacks, and Spider-Man was dodging most of the time. Was he fighting a villain? Is that why the school has been shaking? Have they been invaded? Whatever the reason, Peter was fighting back rather than running away. He wasn't afraid to put his life down for others, despite the rules against it. Then again, this was the school campus and they were under attack. There are loopholes if it counts as self-defense. The new fact ignited something in her chest, and her eyes held a fiery glare. Enlarging her hands, she pushed past the students and moved towards the window instead of the door. She climbed onto the hallway rails and reeled her fist back, knowing what happened next was going to hurt. Despite this, she flung her fist forward and broke the window with one go. She wasted no time jumping out through the opening. Landing between Sandman and Spider-Man, Kendo held out one of her massive hands and guarded her friend. Her other hand had shrunk down, cut and bleeding from the glass. Her blood dripped to the ground, but her focus remained on the enemy. The hell? Sandman jumped back into a defensive position. Kendo? Spider-Man questioned as he regained his composure. You messed with the wrong school, she shouted to the villain. You better start running, because I'm the last person you want to get in a fistfight with. Chapter 14, The Eye of the Storm. Elsewhere, sitting in what seemed like a massive steel cube, the rhino sulked in anger. His strength proved difficult to maintain in a normal cell, so he had been moved to one of stronger materials. The most he was about to do was dent the walls, but breaking them proved more difficult even with his great power. His anger proved his weakness, always wearing himself down too quickly with overexertion. Cameras were placed in the corners outside the cube, watching to ensure that he did not escape. The only thing outside the cube beyond the cameras was a door, and a single guard sitting in a chair reading from the newspaper. A loud banging startled the lone guard, making him stand up in surprise. He was confused to find the banging did not come from Rhino's prison this time, but from somewhere above him. The knocking and banging traveled through the vents quickly, until it stopped just above him. Breaking the ventilation opening down, a massive pillar of water shot toward the guard and consumed him, lifting him into the air and throwing him against the wall several times over. He finally passed out as the water took physical form. Hydro Man regained his composure and approached the large metal cube, pushing his hands against it. Water leaked from his skin and let liquid drip from them. The water reached the cracks and seams of the cube and entered inside, beginning to corrode the material inside. A creaking caught Rhino's attention as he looked around to notice water dripping from the ceiling. The wall Hydro Man stood in front of fell, nearly crushing him had he not become water to avoid it. Good to see you, ugly, Hydro Man said. Boss needs your help. So, quit sitting around and let's get to work. Meanwhile, only half the students stared out the broken window and watched the scene unfold below. Kendo stood strong in front of Spider-Man with one hand enlarged, the other cut and bleeding onto the ground. If she tried to enlarge her wounded hand, the cuts would likely expand as well and only become worse. For now, she had to fight using only one hand. Run away like a good little rat, girl. Sandman shouted, his arm extending into a fist of sand. You don't want to go toe-to-toe with me. I was gonna say the same to you. She retorted, I think the beach is down north. You washed up the sandcastle. The fact that Kendo was choosing to fight surprised Peter the most. She was the one who told him it was wrong to fight villains without a license. Yet, here she was using her powers to protect him. She's become a type of hypocrite considering these events. Kendo, Spider-Man grunted from the pain in his body. What are you doing? I thought you said we can't fight without a license. Yeah, and I thought about scolding you, she sighed. But there are loopholes if it counts as self-defense. Yeah, but... Spider-Man noticed the blood running down Kendo's arm. If she didn't get that treatment, it would eventually get infected. Sandman's fist came flying toward them at an angle. Spider-Man wrapped his arms around Kendo's waist and leaped into the air with her. His feet landed on the nearest wall of the school and stuck there, while Sandman's fist collided with the ground where they once were. The villain looked up and swung his arm toward them, a pillar of sand ascending the wall. Spider-Man quickly pushed off the surface and swung down on a web, his foot colliding with Sandman's face. Spider-Man jumped back to the ground behind the villain, who held his face in pain. He wasted no time and webbed up his hands and pulled on him, restraining his movement. Kendo! He called out, no description to his orders. She didn't need further instructions as she lifted her enlarged fist and swung at the villain with a strong right hook. His body crumbled into sand as pieces of him fell everywhere, breaking the webs held by the arachnid. Her hand shrunk back down, tired from the strain her other hand was experiencing. Spider-Man rushed to her side and gently held her wounded hand, examining the cuts around the knuckles and wrist. Kendo, we need to get this taken care of. Go find a recovery girl and get patched up. I'm not leaving you to fight all by yourself. She retorted, don't start thinking you're gonna play the lone wolf hero today. Spider-Man groaned, knowing there was no chance in convincing her to leave. He facepalmed his forehead, trying to think of a solution. Then, his eyes landed on the palm of his hand, where the nanites protected him with the suit they created. There was a lot he had yet to understand about the technology, but what he knew with certainty was how it responded to thought. Gently, he took Kendo's wounded hand and enclosed his palm tightly around it. His thoughts filled with his desire to protect her, and the nanites responded accordingly. The sleeve of his left arm pulled away from the elbow down, shifting like sand and traveling onto Kendo's skin. She was startled at first but allowed the event to unfold, needing to trust that Peter knew what he was doing. The nanites covered her hand up to her elbow, mimicking the design on Spider-Man's other hand. However, once the glove had solidified around her arm, the colors shifted and changed. The blue became black, while the red became green. Spider-Man released her hand as she examined the glove around her skin. She moved her fingers around and stretched them, finding their movement to have improved and the pain numbing somewhat. Whoa! Kendo spoke softly, that's incredible. I actually didn't know it could change color. Spider-Man shrugged, noted tip. Definitely a good feature, 10 out of 10 I'd buy it again. Sandman's foot slammed into the ground, the toes and shoe beginning to reform to solid shape. Kendo and Spider-Man jumped back in surprise, getting into an attack position. I don't suggest enlarging your gloved hand, Spider-Man suggested. There aren't enough nanites to stretch that far. I'll be fine, I still have one good fist to punch with. Sandman's form came into being, a devilish grin on his face. No matter how many times they knocked him down, his abilities allowed for him to reform whenever he pleased. When his shape was completed, the details of his body came next and recreated the sand villain. You know punches and kicks aren't going to take me down, webhead. He laughed. You're going to have to do better than that. Spider-Man grabs Kendo's hand tightly, tugging on her. We need to go, he said, run. Though she protested, she was tugged along and dragged back into the building as Sandman chased after them. The halls weren't as crowded, but still filled with students running in multiple directions. The pair found it difficult to maneuver through the bodies, so Spider-Man grabbed Kendo and held her tightly, leaping to the ceiling and crawling across it with ease. Sandman was able to maneuver around them much more easily, though still found himself in some traffic. Peter! Kendo exclaimed, pointing to a door down below them. In there. Hopefully she hasn't left, but maybe someone in there can help us. Spider-Man didn't hesitate to jump back to the ground and kick the door open. They were able to close it just before Sandman reached them, stopping him only for a moment. This door won't stop me. Sandman shouted, forming his hand into a sandhammer and busting the door down. The hinges came undone and the doors fell to the ground, revealing a pitch-black room. Sandman walked inside, looking around and searching for a light switch. It was difficult to make out what was in the room other than several tables. The only sounds he heard were the steps he took against the ground. It was far too quiet for his liking. They were hiding from him like cockroaches. Get out here! His voice echoed, fight me head on. The sound of something powering up caused him to turn around, ready to pounce on his enemy. Before he could move, he was engulfed in a barrage of flames and smoke. The fire consumed his body and ignited the sand he created. From the bottom up, his body began to solidify further into a clear blue color. The flames only stopped when Sandman completely turned to glass, his expression stuck in one of surprise. Woo! The girl shouted, holding a flamethrower in her hands. That's what I'm talking about. I told you my baby could do it. The lights turned on and revealed the woman responsible. The girl's hair was pink, and style asymmetrically, having two longer strands on the right side of her face. Her outfit consisted of a tank top and baggy work pants, and a pair of goggles sitting on her head. She adjusted her gloves and set the flamethrower down, giving it a pat before putting her hands on her hips. Kendo and Spiderman jumped down from the ceiling, observing the Sandman as a glass statue. "Thanks for that, May," Kendo said with a smile. "I'm sorry we rushed this onto you." PFT. "Nah," she exclaimed with a bright smile and wide eyes. "I gotta take my new baby for a test drive." "I'd say that was a successful test run." May rushed up to Spider-Man and shook his hand aggressively. "Hey there. I'm May Hatsum. Gotta say I love the tech in that suit, though I think I could do one better. Give me a few days and I can whip you up something amazing. No, spectacular. Or sensational. Superior." He laughed and managed to free his hand from her grip. "Thanks, but you don't have to. Telling me not to invent is like telling someone not to breathe. Not fun and counterproductive." "May," Kendo interrupted, "do you have anything here that can take care of crowds? There are a lot of villains out there, most of them searching for Peter." May put a hand to her chin. Well, I may have just the thing." "One moment." She zoomed away from the pair and practically jumped into a pile of gadgets like it was a pool. The two young heroes only stood awkwardly with their hands behind their backs. Tools and small inventions went flying across the room, almost hitting them as they passed by. "We should just be running," Kendo suddenly said. "We can't fight these villains. We should just be escaping like everyone else and let the pros handle this." "Why aren't we?" "You know why," Peter said sternly. "I think you're just finally feeling it." "Feeling what?" "The power." He looked into her eyes, his eye lenses shrinking. "The power that we have, and the responsibility that comes with it. It's why I went out and fought villains, because if I stand around and let people die, it's my fault." "It wouldn't be your fault. You're saying that if Sandman killed me and you didn't do anything, you wouldn't feel like it's your fault?" Kendo was silent, looking away and down at the ground. "I couldn't let him hurt you. I was worried what would happen if I let you fight alone. I thought back to Hydro Man and I just moved. It's what I feel all the time, Kendo. Letting my body move." May popped out from the pile of gadgets, holding a device in her hands. She shouted, found it, and rushed over to the pair waiting for her. In her hands was a bag of small metal orbs, with a button atop each of them. The orb's size was no more than the palm of a hand. "These little bad boys should do the trick for ya," she exclaimed excitedly. "Press the button on top and throw it. It releases electrified wires that trap the bad guys. Stay clear though, it latches onto whatever it can get, including you." He took the bag in his gloved hand and threw it over his shoulder, tightening the strap against his costume. "We need to fight them head on if we want out of here. I want you two to head to the back exit of the school." "I'm heading to the front." "What? No way." Kendo denied. "We aren't splitting up. Why do you have to go out the front?" He began to say something in response, but he was caught in a web of his own words. It wasn't a burden that she needed to take on, especially not for him. If Norman really had his Aunt May as bait to draw him out, then this was a fight he needed to take on alone. Dragging anyone else into it will simply get them hurt. Kendo suddenly took his exposed hand, massaging his skin in a comforting motion. She knew he was feeling pain, the kind that was difficult to share. He had that same vibe the night they fought Hydro Man. He was so desperate to keep her out of danger, that he shut her out in every way. She wasn't going to let him sing that song again. Slowly, she lifted her hand up and reached for the edge of his mask, pinching the material together to grip it. Peter reacted instinctively and grabbed her arm with his exposed hand. The lenses of his mask shrunk in focus as he looked away from her. His heart pounded with anxiety. The thought of her getting hurt by following him scared him too much to risk it. He wanted to say something that would convince her to drop her hand, but she remained firm in place. It hurt too much to look her in the eyes and tell her he plans what's practically a suicide mission, all to save someone who may or may not be here. Eventually, he looked back at her, his lenses widening to show the fullness of the eyes. As if a spell was casted over him, he removed his hand from her arm, and allowed her to lift his mask further up. The nanomaterial separated from the rest of the costume and revealed his face underneath. His mask rested on his head, clumped together with his hair. Kendo looked him dead in the eyes, still holding his hand. "You aren't going to fight alone." Her expression was stern. "I'm a hero too. I have powers just like you. You can't do everything on your own, you need to allow people to help you. There are only so many villains one person can beat by themselves. You'll burn yourself out if you don't accept help. Whether you accept it or not, I'll just follow you. Kendo dash. Ever tried carrying a boulder up a hill? Kendo asked abruptly, super strength or not, that will be difficult. Gravity is against you, and there isn't a lot of grip on the boulder itself. It's a lot easier to push, however, if you have someone helping you. So, let me help you carry it. She pulled the mask back down over his face, letting the material reconnect with the rest of his suit. He was out of quips and retorts at this point, having no argument to present to her that would convince her drive to change. She was the immovable object against the unstoppable force. The only way to win was to surrender. Okay, he lifted his shoulders as his chin held high. Front entrance it is. Make sure you don't fall behind. May jumped toward Kendo and hung herself on the back of her shoulders, smiling brightly as she laughed. No problem. You'll see, my babies will kick those bad guys to Kingdom Come. You mean Kingdom Come? Would have said it if I meant it. The doors of the workroom suddenly combusted and fell over, sparking with electricity. Spiderman stood in front of Kendo and May instinctively, watching the figure walk through the smoke. It was a man dressed in yellow and green, with electricity sparking off his body. Kendo gripped Peter's shoulder, sensing the tension suddenly surging through him. Good to see you, wallcrawler, the man said, snapping his fingers and releasing sparks into the air. You could never resist a crisis. Electro, Spiderman greeted. What are you doing here, Max? Taking the opportunity to kill you, what else? He shrugged. Get past me, and maybe you can save that old woman out front. Oh. May exclaimed, an electric-based villain. The perfect test runner. She reached into the bag strapped around Spiderman and grabbed one of the many spheres inside. Quickly pressing the button on top, it started beeping loudly as she winded her arm back. Go, my child. She threw the sphere like a baseball, and Electro prepared to counter it. What he didn't expect was for the sphere to suddenly explode into dust and release several massive nets of thin material that wrapped around him. The nets clung together like magnets and tightened around the villain, limiting his movement. The hell is this? Electro tried to shock his way out, but his power drained each time he tried. Ha! Nice try, but my nets are perfect conductors. Can't shock your way out of them, it only makes them tighter. She looked at Kendo and Spiderman with a smile and wide eyes. Go on ahead, I want to have fun with this one a bit longer. Spiderman grinned under the mask. Have fun, and thanks. The duo ran out the door as May picked up more gear and tools, a large grin of excitement taking over. Kendo rubbed the hand encased by the glove as they ran through the halls, feeling the material shift on her skin. It had a sense of comfortability that made her feel safer than she should. The glove fit with every movement, numbing the pain she felt from the cuts. It was like Peter was holding her hand, healing and protecting her amid this crisis. As they reached the front door leading outside, Spiderman stopped just as his hand reached for the handle. A tingling sensation surged through his head, making him back off the door to freedom. When Kendo caught up with him, she noticed his hesitation. Peter, she put a hand on his shoulder. What's wrong? His lenses shrunk as he turned his head to face her. He's waiting for me. Who's waiting? The arachnid hero looked back at the door and gripped the handle tightly. My mistake. He pushed the door open, allowing the light to enter the hallway. The outside was bright with the sun high in the sky, showing the time was about midday now. In front of the fountain far from them was Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin. He held his hand on the shoulder of an old woman. Her hair was white and her skin wrinkled. She was dressed in a long woman's skirt and blue top, with a pair of reading glasses tucked in her shirt pocket. Her legs were trembling, showing that she was feeling afraid for her well-being. There was no telling how much she has been through since her arrival. Around Goblin were multiple figures, making a total of 6. To his left were familiar figures like Sandman, Hydro-Man, and the Vulture. Sandman must have escaped his glass casing after they had left. Hopefully May didn't get hurt when he did. To his right was Craven and Rhino. Vulture was one he hadn't seen yet, sporting his classic green costume with wings under his arms. The old man slouched, his bones not as strong as they used to be. Meanwhile, Rhino was one he was most surprised to see, as he assumed he was still in prison. The villains all stood confidently, as if they had fully planned how the next 5 minutes would turn out for both sides. May Parker? He asked aloud, trying his best to distinguish his voice. Everything is going to be okay. Why are you doing a voice? Kendo quietly asked. That woman is my aunt. She doesn't know I'm Spider-Man and I'd like to keep it that way for as long as possible. Kendo nodded, clenching her fists and getting ready for action. I'm here, Goblin. Spider-Man shouted at him, now let her go, and we can settle this like gentlemen. Well, gentle monsters. You know what, I don't know the protocol here. I won't be releasing her just yet, boy. Goblin smirks sinisterly. My friends here would like to have some fun first. Kendo, Spider-Man spoke quietly and sternly. I need you to stay out of this fight. I don't want you getting hurt. Peter, I can help you fight them, and I could help you die. Doesn't mean I will, though. He made the gesture with his hand and shot a thick web down at Kendo's feet. They stuck her to the ground firmly, pinning her toes to the concrete with a death grip. Kendo struggled to pull the webbing off but found it to be useless. Spider-Man, she scolded, don't. You'll be killed. But you won't be, and that's the point. He began walking closer to the sinister group, tightening his grip on the bag of spheres, with Kendo shouting at him from behind. As Goblin took a step backwards, the other 5 villains took place in front, pounding their fists together and stretching their necks. Each of them had a bone to pick with the wall crawler, and none of them planned to hold back. Every prey has its end, Spider-Man, Kraven taunted, pulling out a pair of knives. When this is over, your blood will stain these blades, and I will hang your torn costume on my wall. This is actually nanotech, he retorted. I don't think it rips. Joke while you can, shouted Vulture. You can't fight us all. Yes, I can. Spider-Man put himself into a fighting position. It's just really going to hurt. Rhino was the first to charge toward him, barreling his horn toward the arachnid's chest. Spider-Man leapt over him and slammed his feet on his back, pushing himself off into the air and throwing Rhino off balance. As soon as the hero landed, he immediately ducked to avoid Sandman's extending fist. He jumped again as his fist came back around, shooting a web and swinging away from him. His swinging reached its peak when the Vulture came swooping in. He grabbed Spider-Man and carried him high into the air, squeezing his arms against his side. You're out of your league, Spider-Man. Vulture shouted over the wind. And you're out of your prime. Spider-Man kicked his stomach and forced his muscles to release him. Jumping off Vulture, he threw a sphere out from the bag and let it explode in Vulture's face. A large net wrapped around him and ceased his flight, sending him falling. The arachnid went diving toward the ground, building speed before he shot out a web and lifted himself just before touching the ground. Using the velocity of the swing, he kicked his feet directly into Kraven's chest, sending him skidding against the ground. Spider-Man hadn't even touched the concrete before Rhino's fist smacked against him. He sent him tumbling, needing to shoulder roll into recovery and leap onto his feet. Once again, his spider sense tingled, and he jumped away from a pillar of water that nearly crushed him from above. The water followed him as he continued to dodge quickly, only being scratched by the liquid a few times. Sandman formed from the ground behind him, throwing a sandy fist toward his back as Hydro Man threw one toward his front. Leaping away, the two fists collided and evaporated on contact. The two mixed and turned each arm into mud, slowly trying to recover their true forms. Spider-Man landed on one knee after backflipping through the air. He looked around at the villains one by one, each of them recovering and surrounding him. When you die, Kraven recovered to his feet and inches toward the forming circle around the arachnid. I'll show off your mask as a trophy. I thought the first rule of Fight Club was never talk about Fight Club? Spider-Man cocked his head to the side. Different world, different rules I guess. The circle grew smaller, the villains enclosed around him. Ah, come on guys. Spider-Man shrugged his shoulders. I know I'm annoying, but it's a case of monkey see monkey do. I'm only trying to return the mental pain all your ugly faces give me. That's it. I'm gonna drown him. Hydro Man recovered his arm. But I can swim, the hero gasped. Oh my gosh, I never asked if you could even swim. How ironic would that be? Enough. Goblin's voice forced the criminals to stop in their tracks, backing off slightly. With his eyes squinted, he threw the old woman to the ground and let the pain hold her down. Spider-Man wanted to go to her aid, but Goblin's approaching figure made him back away. Perhaps it's best I take care of this myself, Goblin said. Finally, this will end. Why do you hate me so much? Spider-Man asked. What, did I steal your playing cards or something? Goblin stopped, raising an eyebrow at him. You really don't know, do you? Know what? That green is a horrible color on you? You're essentially a wannabe Hulk. The monster's eyes filled with fire and rage. You don't know. Of course, you don't. You're a smart-ass kid trying to be a hero, but you only make everything worse. People die because of you. Women, children, husbands, wives. His guard dropped, sensing the grief that his enemy was feeling. It made his heart ache with worry. Did someone you know die because of me? Oh, my boy, he lifted his fiery fist. The only death we will talk about here is yours. The ringing in the young hero's ear returns. The colors around his vision shifted into a 3D spectrum, almost disorienting to his mind. The tingling began forming in the back of his head, spreading down his body. Something changed in the atmosphere, something big had been added. Or someone. He flipped backwards away from the monster, just as something came flying from the sky. A massive fist collided with Goblin, smashing him into the ground and destroying the concrete below him. The sudden impact caused the other villains to back up in surprise, looking up at the body that the fist was connected to. It was a large woman dressed in a fancy costume, with horns coming out of her head. Her smile showed she was either confident or cocky that this would turn in her favor. Her eyes drifted to the arachnid hero, and she winked at him. Sorry about the surprise, Lady said. It's nice to see you again, cutie. Chapter 15, The Calm After the Storm. The other villains stepped back in a defensive manner, readying their abilities to attack. Under Lady's fist, Goblin attempted to push her knuckles off him, struggling against the broken concrete beneath him. She was surprised to find him struggling so much, considering the increase in her strength due to her growth. It was like pushing against a stretched rubber band. Spiderman could only stare, almost happy to suddenly have backup on his side. While he still believed this was his fight alone, having a pro-hero step in gave him a bit more confidence. Adding to that, it was someone he has met before, and can be confident in their abilities. Goblin finally managed to push her fist up enough to roll out of the way, letting her hand collide with the ground and crumble to create a small dip in the surface. Lady looked at him determined and attempted to swat the back of her hand at him. Her back end was stopped by a wall of sand, sending an uncomfortable sensation through her bones. She pulled her hand back in recoil, massaging her skin to dull the pain. Don't just stand there! Goblin shouted as he got to his feet. Kill her! Craven drew his blades and charged for the giant woman's feet. He leapt into the air, winding up his arm for a downward strike. Just as he was able to reach, a long tree branch suddenly grew from the distance and threw an uppercut to his chin. The impact sends Craven to the ground, smacking against his back and falling unconscious. The trees extended further toward the fallen Aunt May, surrounding her in a wall of wood that shielded her from the outside, including from light. The figure connected to the branches stepped into view, keeping his distance from the other villains. The hostage is secure. Kamui confirmed. Groot wannabe. Spider-Man shouted in joy, Hey! I haven't seen you in a while, Kamui. Woods, he shouted back, Never mind, we have enough to deal with. A talon from Vulture's wings sliced through the air and traveled straight through the extended branch coming from Kamui's arm. It broke into splinters and separated from the dome protecting May as Vulture tackled Kamui and carried him into the sky. The last thing we need is more heroes. Vulture said, Let's see how you handle heights. Kamui looked away for a moment, then back at Vulture. Pretty well. He freed himself from his grip and pushed off with his feet, jumping further into the air. Lady's large hand suddenly smacked Vulture and sent him barreling to the ground, as she used her other hand to catch Kamui gently. He held onto her ring finger to avoid flying out of her grasp. Kendo watched as the two pro-heroes took on the 6 sinister villains. Lady was a table-turner with her size and strength, but some of the villains' abilities could still prove troublesome. She tried to tear away the webbing again, smashing her gloved fist at it to force it off. Kendo was still angry at Peter for making her sit out. She could have helped him fight off these villains, he said they would stay together. Then he turns around and immediately breaks that promise. If they make it out of this, they are going to have a serious conversation, possibly involving bodily harm. The glove around her hand suddenly started glowing around the gauntlet, emitting a faint yellow color. Each time she moved a drastic amount, the glow increased its brightness. The sensation vibrated through her fingers, like an energy coursing through her skin. She worried about what this meant, and if it was safe to continue attacking the web with that hand. Her attention was stolen when a pillar of water emerged in front of her, forming the Hydro Man in all his sinister glory. Hiya, sweetheart, he said with an evil grin, don't think we forgot about you. Kendo started to panic, trying desperately to tear away at the webbing. She enlarged her working hand and tried to punch the webbing away. The ground beneath it cracked, but the webbing still stuck. As Hydro Man got closer, she lifted her other hand up in retaliation. A burst of light escaped from the glove. The energy released in a ring shape that caused Hydro Man to explode into water. The webbing on her feet deteriorated in seconds and sent her tumbling backwards and rolling onto her side. Her other hand shrunk to normal size as she ended up on her stomach, dirt covering her face. Everything was blurry and dizzy, her eyes crossing and shifting for a moment. In the blur of their vision, she could see clouds of color moving around. One cloud of colors, blue and brown, made its way closer to her. It grew larger and larger until it took up her entire line of sight. Finally, her eyes were able to focus and make out more of the details. It was a figure, standing over her with a mask on his face. He reached down and turned her body over, lifting her head up with his hands. "Hey, come on. Keep your eyes open," Kamui said. "Can you stand?" Kendo sat up, holding her head to put pressure on the aching. "I'm okay. I think." "Can you fight?" She looked at him in surprise. "What, can you fight?" "Because escape won't be possible without hard work." Kendo wiped dirt from her cheek and nodded. He helped her stand up straight despite her slight wobbling. "How did you know to come?" Kendo asked. "Another pro hero called us when she realized what was happening. She joined the others at USJ. We have a few other pros arriving at the school to deal with this crisis." Loud stomping made their way toward the two. Rhino charged at them with his mighty horn pointed forward. Kamui readied himself for the attack, but Kendo stepped in front of him instead. Her working hand enlarged as Rhino reached them. She grabbed his head tightly in her palm and stopped him in his tracks, despite skidding backwards a few feet. With him in place, Kamui wrapped his branches around Rhino and lifted him up into the air. "Hey! Put me down!" Rhino shouted. "If you say so," Kamui responded by slamming him back into the ground, then throwing him into the distance. Rhino crashed into the ground and rolled onto his back, feeling dizzy from the impact. Crashing at their feet, the arachnid hero held his stomach in pain, having just been impacted there. He had no time to stand up before Goblin landed in front of them, fire escaping his eyes. The veins on his muscles pulsed, showing his heartbeat was rather fast. The massive monster was angry and needed to lash out on its source. Kamui stood in front of the two young heroes, creating a shield of wood. "Stay back, monster." "Wood," Goblin said as a ball of fire formed in his hands. "You know it burns, don't you?" A single punch was thrown by Goblin, and his fist collided with the wooden shield. It immediately caught fire and began to spread to the rest of Kamui's body. He panicked, trying to put out the flames before Goblin swatted him to the side. This time Kendo stood in front of Goblin, enlarging her free hand. "Step out of my way," he threatened, "before I do the same to you, if not worse. You need to back off." She shouted, "Attacking innocents won't do any good. Spider-Man is not innocent." He shouted back, both his hands engulfed with fire, "He is no hero. All he does is make things worse. When I get my hands on the Infinity Stones, I'll finally make everything work in my favor. The universe will bend to my will, and finally I will get what I want." "Bend to your will?" Kendo questioned, not fully understanding what he was talking about. "It does not matter. You won't live to see it." Goblin raised his fist into the air, slamming it down at Kendo. It never hit. Goblin's fist stopped dead in its tracks when an alternate pair of hands caught it. Spider-Man's grip tightened on the knuckles of the Infinity Gauntlet, the Space Stone just a few inches from his fingers. The flames from Goblin's skin started to burn through the nanites of his suit, revealing the skin underneath. In his anger, Goblin increased the fire around him and began to burn more of his suit. One of his lenses began to slowly deteriorate, revealing his eye underneath that blinked repeatedly to avoid the heat. "You can't fight forever, Peter," he said. "I will kill you and everyone you love. What have you become?" Peter shouted, "All I try to do is save people. What have I done to you to make you hate me so much?" Goblin stared him down, and what came next surprised Peter greatly. The Green Goblin, his worst enemy, had begun to cry. "I wanted to help people too once," Goblin mourned, "but my purpose is long since gone. And it's because of you." He threw his other fist in a side hook, and Spider-Man had to release one of his hands to catch it. He struggled even more now, almost losing his balance. His left knee began to bend down and almost touched the surface of the concrete. His skin had begun to yearn for the release of pain. The spider sense in his head rang so loud, the only other thing he could hear was his heartbeat. All he saw was the rage and misery of Goblin, his enemy, yet once friend. The wind shifted around him, as something moved into his vision. Kendo, with one hand enlarged, struck the Goblin in his stomach and sent him stumbling backwards. The separation made Spider-Man fall on his butt, helpless while watching his friend move forward. The Goblin tried to strike her, but she caught his fist in her massive palm. The intensity of the strike traveled through her body, finding its way to her other arm. The gauntlet glove glowed yellow once again, filling with power. She didn't think so when she threw Goblin's hand into the air, then sent her other fist down on him. It collided with his knee and light exploded from the spot on his body. The monster screamed in agony as he felt the bones of his knee break, maybe even shatter. He fell, unable to maintain his balance without one of his knees. Kendo stepped backwards and almost tripped over her own feet to gain distance from him. The other villains turned their heads in surprise when they heard his scream of pain. The flames died out from his body, for he no longer had the strength to use his power. Spider-Man stood up as the nanites tried to restore his costume. Most of what was damaged fixed itself, but without the extra nanites from Kendo's glove, there were still a few patches that showed skin, such as his eye lens. Osborn! Sandman shouted. Don't worry about him. Until Lady said, focus on what's in front of you. She attempted to slam her foot down on Sandman, but his form deteriorated and slithered around her like a snake. The sand moved up her body and wrapped itself around her arm, trying to control its movement. She grabbed her arm with her other hand, forcing against his control. The bigger they are dash Sandman couldn't finish before the lady smashed her fist into the ground, the vibration forcing Sandman off. The harder they hit, she finished. Craven stood and recovered from the earlier blow, holding his head in pain. Just as he got to one knee, a massive hand came flying in and swatted him like a fly, sending him flying across the ground and smacking into Vulture's unconscious body. Goblin, horribly in pain, looked around and saw how his villains were being beaten so easily. He reached into the pocket of his tight suit and pulled out a small device, pressing the button on the side. We need backup at the school entrance. He shouted, get here as quickly as you can. Immediately, massive footsteps could be heard from inside the school. The backup he had requested was on its way. Kendo stuck close to Spider-Man, the thought of so many villains scaring her greatly. Kamui placed himself beside them, ready to guard them from whatever would come through. Even Lady shifted her foot back in preparation to kick them aside. The voices of villains approached the door with anger and excitement, and then it stopped. There was dead silence, as if all had ceased when they reached the door. No movement, no voices, just utter silence on the other side. Goblin couldn't understand what was happening, not when just seconds ago they seemed eager to come through. Then, a sound finally came through. The sound of faint wind blowing through a thin pipe, shifting and moving all around. It was the only sound that was heard as the light within the doors faded away, overcasted by shadow. The doors flung open with a powerful force. Rather than villains, a thick black mist rushed out like water and consumed everything in its path. Soon, the entire front entrance was covered in blackness. Despite how tightly Kendo hung onto Spider-Man, she could not feel him. She could not feel anything beyond her own heartbeat. No one could. The only one who could feel or see was Lady, whose body stood just above the shadowy cloud. She felt nothing below her waist, but it didn't scare her. She knew what was going on, and felt relieved, if anything. A figure jumped out from the top of the bubble of darkness, a trail of shadow following her until it faded away. Lady held out her hand as Overcast landed in her palm on one knee, her scarf blowing in the wind. Top right near the stairs, Overcast said, that's where Kamui and the kids are. The hostage is still in the wooden dome to the middle left of the yard. Reach down, grab them, and get them out of here. I'm going to try and subdue the villains. Lady sighed in relief. Good thing you came when you did, huh? Sorry I didn't come sooner. The USJ attack was crazy, but the kids there are safe now. Some injuries, but overall, they're okay. They're waiting until the school is clear to come back. I took care of the villains inside, now we gotta finish off the ones here. Lady nodded, okay, ready when you are. With a nod, Overcast backflipped off her hand and dived headfirst back into the shadows. Once inside, she was able to swim around it like water, floating in the air as she used the shadow for support. Lady followed her instructions and reached the top right near the stairs. It took her a few tries, but she eventually pulled Kamui and the kids out in her hand. The three of them were shocked when they suddenly regained their ability to feel, and Kendo hugged Spider-Man tighter in relief. "Where's May?" Spider-Man asked. Looking to the middle left, Mt. Lady reached in until her hand stopped on something. She couldn't feel it, but she was unable to move further, and she knew she wasn't at the ground yet, so it must have been the dome. Carefully, she tried to rip the top of it off, pulling out wood and throwing it to the side. Reaching in again, she dug her fingers into the dirt and pulled up like a claw machine. Once again it took a few tries, but finally she caught May Parker between her fingers. When she saw that she had her, she adjusted her grip accordingly and brought her two hands together. May was conscious, but only barely. She must have been exhausted from the experience. "She's okay," Spider-Man sighed with relief, "thank goodness. We need to get her to a hospital." "Same for you and your friend, sweetheart," the lady said. "Overcast can handle the villains from here, you two need medical attention." "I am not abandoning this fight. I can't. I have to finish what I started." A sudden explosion of purple energy erupted from the bubble of darkness. The shadows began to pull themselves inward, combusting on themselves. "It's Goblin," Spider-Man warned, "he's trying to suck the darkness away. Get them out of here now." Kamui put a hand on his shoulder. "You aren't fighting alone, kid. Then stay and help." "I don't care." Kamui looked at Mt. Lady with concern. They both could clearly see that he wasn't going to back down anytime soon. This was something too personal for him, whether they liked it or not. "Spider-Man." Kendo took the glove of her hand and grabbed his palm, where his skin still showed. The nanites traveled back up his arm and released her wounded hand to the air. The extra nanites repaired the rest of his costume, patching up the rest of the holes and burns. Finally, his costume was complete once again. "Good luck," she said, giving him a sorrowful expression. Kamui and Spider-Man jumped off Mt. Lady's hand as she started jogging down the street with Kendo and May. The two male heroes landed on the ground just as the shadows got pulled away from them. Vulture, Sandman, and the other villains were incapacitated in random spots across the yard. Overcast had done her job well. All that remained was the Goblin, on his stomach and holding the gauntlet skyward as darkness was drunk by a small portal around the stone. "Not here," Goblin said. "I will not be defeated here. I've worked too hard to get to this point. I have the Infinity Gauntlet. Me. I will not allow myself to be beaten by a child again. Give it up, Norman." Spider-Man commanded. "Your knee is broken, your little hit squad is down for the count. There's nothing more you can do." "That's where you're wrong." Goblin's body suddenly began to ignite with fire. The flames escaped and exploded in multiple directions. The two heroes jumped and dodged a wave that flew toward them. While Spider-Man was able to dodge with ease, Kamui had a bit of a harder time. Each time he tried to use a wood shield for protection, it only took one hit before it burned away. "Norman, stop. It's over." Spider-Man yelled as he dodged another flame. "This has to end. It'll end when I avenge her. It'll end when she's back in my arms." Spider-Man landed in a perch position, his lenses widening. Goblin tried to stand on his good knee, holding the gauntlet in the air. "I don't care what happens. I'll send you to a place you can never escape from." The flames all suddenly died in an instant, robbed of their power. Goblin's eyes widened as his breath was stolen from him, his arms dropping to his side. He fell face first onto the ground, Overcast standing on his back with a needle in his neck. She was panting, as if she had just been running at a quick pace. She pushed on the end of the needle and injected the rest of the unknown substance into his bloodstream. Pulling it out, she hopped off him and watched. His body began to shrink and lose muscle mass. Green's skin became pale white, his thin orange hair growing back only slightly. He was unable to fit into his massive suit, as the outfit laid on him like a blanket. Whatever she had done turned him human again, robbing him of his monster form. The Infinity Gauntlet fell out of his hands as they shrunk, and lazily sat around his arm. The man fell unconscious, unable to move, only breathing slow breaths. "It's over," Overcast said. Spider-Man stared, almost dumbfounded that he was able to see Norman's human form once again. It had been some time since he last had, he almost forgot what he looked like. "How did you?" Spider-Man started. "How did you do that?" "The serum I injected him with cancels out chemical imbalances. Supposedly takes away someone's quirk for a while, but it's different for Goblin, isn't it?" She asked. "He doesn't have a quirk, right?" "Doesn't have one?" Kamui asked. How's that possible? His powers, she continued, something about them seemed off, not traditional to quirks. Quirks are specific, his aren't. He seems experimental, so I figured there was a chemical imbalance involved and ran to the science lab to wipe something up. But, how did you know he didn't? Spider-Man didn't understand how easily she figured out Goblin didn't have a quirk. Then again, she was a pro, so perhaps it isn't that much out of her skill range. We should call the police and have them collect these villains. They'll need to treat this man as well. He pointed to Norman. Your friend seemed to have shattered his knee. Yeah, I saw. Spider-Man, Kamui said sternly, today was a surprise, I imagine. I'll talk to the police and explain everything. They'll understand why you and the others had to fight. Spider-Man sighed, sitting down and holding his head. Not because it was hurting, but because he was emotionally exhausted as well as physically. Fighting so many of his villains at once, and encountering Kendo and Aunt May, it became so much for him to take at once after being here for so many weeks. Overcast walked over to him and sat by his side. You okay, sweetie? Yeah, I'm just tired. He looked up at her. Thanks for coming, Overcast. Mayum, she smiled, bending down on her knees to level her eyes with his. My real name is Mayum. Peter removed his mask and smiled, bending over to hug her gently. He let his head relax on her shoulders and finally allow his muscles to release the burn they acquired from the fight. Her hand caressed the back of his neck, motivating him to take slower breaths and let his eye close in relaxation. His eyes watered after closing them, letting them release the stress they collected. The tears accumulated leaked from the corner of his eyes and only traveled an inch before dying out. Don't worry, Peter, she caressed, it's over now. He opened his eyes and looked over at Kamui, who was standing over Norman. Kamui picked up the Infinity Gauntlet and examined it, reaching to pick away at the Space Stone. Peter jumped from the hug and rushed over to him, yanking the gauntlet away. Hey! Kamui shouted. This needs to be protected, Peter scolded. I've been trying to get this away from him ever since he stole it. I need to protect it. Holding the gauntlet in his hands, his eyes drifted to the Space Stone. The object that brought him here in the first place was now resting in his grasp. If he wanted, he could command the stone to take him home. Grab Aunt May, and off they would be without a second thought. At the same time, the remainder of the stones are still out there somewhere. Could he really abandon them here just to return home? Kamui stole the gauntlet out of his hands. This is criminal evidence now, Spider-Man. The police will have to take it into custody and throw it into the evidence vault. That's the way the law works. But it belongs to me, he shouted, sort of. It belongs to well no one I guess, but it's supposed to be in a vault back home. I need to bring it back, and you will. But it needs to go through evidence for this man's trial. Trial? He can go on trial back home. His crimes were committed here in Japan, not in America. Overcast stepped between the two competing males with her hands pushing them apart. Boys. Enough. She turned her body to face Peter. He's right. It's evidence right now. It will be returned to you when the trial is over. They'll take good care of it. You have to trust me. Peter clenched his fists, looking away and rubbing his face. Peter, she asked again, please, trust me. The sound of sirens stopped their conversation as several police cars pulled up to the school. Officers stepped out of their vehicles with guns in hand, walking through the broken door. I should go, Peter said, slipping his mask back on. Peter dash. Spider-Man spun his web and jumped into the air, swinging away from the crime scene as officers began to cuff the unconscious villains. He's stubborn, Kamui said, examining the gauntlet again, so much power in one glove. It's not safe in any man's hands. Overcast sighed, I don't disagree. And that's it. If you're hyped for more, smash that like button. Let's hit 100 likes and keep this legend growing. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because the next part is going to be even crazier. That's it for now, stay legendary, and I'll catch you in the next one.